This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto returned with his OP wife and daughter after a 3 years training trip. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
It was a calm day in Konoha, a verdant village. While civilians went about their daily lives unconcerned, ninjas were seen running along the rooftops. 3 figures were visible on the outskirts of the aforementioned village. The figures can be divided into 1 female and 2 males. The taller of the 2 males appears to be cooing contentedly to a smaller bundle in his hand. He spoke to the infant in a proud tone, saying, "Ah, you're such a small little thing, aren't you? So small and cute, just like your parents." 2 shoulder length bangs frame the man's face and his waist. Length, spiky white hair is tied back into a ponytail. He also seems to have a wart on the left side of his nose. Under his eyes, there are red lines that run the length of his face. He is dressed in a green short shirt kimono and matching pants, with mesh armor showing at his ankles and wrists underneath. In addition, he sports a red haori with 2 yellow circles on either side, handguards, a black belt, and traditional Japanese wooden sandals. In addition to wearing a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil on it, a sizable scroll was visible on his back. This time it was the other male who spoke, who knew the old pervert had such a soft side to him. The man was rather attractive, with a pair of deep blue eyes and a messy shoulder length blonde hair with 2 bangs framing his face. Of course, his clothes were also intriguing. He was wearing a black vest with long sleeves, but the right sleeve was missing. This made his muscled arm and the tattoo around his bicep visible. In addition, he wore black sandals and black anbu pants with tape around the bottom. He also has 2 golden bracelets on his wrists. The last person in the group said sweetly, "Well, he is her great-grandfather, so I hope he would at least try to make a positive impact on her." The older male shivered a little as silver eyes flashed beneath bangs of black hair with crimson highlights. With trepidation, he said, Now, Summer. You know I would not do anything to harm her, right?" The woman, now known as Summer, gave a joyful nod. Jiraiya shook his head quickly as a pair of blades glinted slightly under Summer's white cloak. "Of course, because if a single hair on Yang's head was harmed, then I might have to take what makes you a man." The blonde man put an arm around the girl's shoulders and said, "Oh, come on, Summer." Jiraiya sighed as his student appeared to defend him, saying, "Give the man a break." All too innocently, Naruto said, "Besides, I'm sure he wouldn't want to know what a Rasengan in the ass feels like, nay." At his misfortune, the toad sage cried out in silence and paled quickly. "Papa." Naruto turned to look at the bundle in the older man's arms as his name was called. The little girl's tiny hands reached out, and violet and blue met. "Want." Even though the words were straightforward, the blonde's face was beaming broadly. Naruto pulled Yang from Jiraiya's embrace and embraced her without hesitation. He started stroking her cheek with his own. Yang chuckled joyfully at her father's attention before taking hold of one of his bangs and giving it a slight tug. "Ah, you're such a good girl. You're daddy's little dragon, aren't you?" Naruto gave a little wince. "Yeesh, only one and you already have such a strong grip." His tone was humorous, but his eyes were full of pride. Summer stated, "Well, she is her father's daughter." Her voice carried a trace of melancholy, and Naruto immediately noticed. Naruto shifted Yang so that he could hold her with just one arm. Then, he wrapped his free arm around the silver-eyed girl and held her in a gentle yet firm embrace. His voice was as gentle yet firm as his embrace, and he added a great deal of passion when he said, "And her mother's daughter as well." Summer grinned tearfully as she looked up from her spot in his chest. She kissed him on the lips and then simply said, "Thank you." She then left his embrace. As he observed her continue walking with greater preparation than before, Naruto smiled. The statement, rather than a question, was, "She's completely stolen your heart, hasn't she?" Naruto, however, nodded in agreement with what his sensei had said. He said affectionately, "Yeah, I don't know what I would do without her." Summer could still hear them without the male pair knowing, and her smile and the lightness in her chest grew. Before long, the group reached Konoha's massive wooden gates. Naruto let out a nostalgic sigh. Jiraiya nodded simply in agreement, saying, "Hard to believe I haven't seen this place in over 5 years." Looking at the gate guards who were sleeping, the sage observed, "Looks like it hasn't changed too much in our absence." Jiraiya decided not to bother and simply signed them in before going inside. As soon as they entered, the two, who were acquainted with the old village, noticed the difference in the Hokage monument. Naruto remarked absently, "Looks like they added Granny Tsunade's ugly mug up there." Summer gave him a light handcuff as Jiraiya let out a loud laugh. She gently reprimanded, Be nice. Naruto simply smiled and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Hee, sorry. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me. After removing Yang from her blanket, Naruto laid her on his shoulders. Jiraiya accepted the blanket from him with suspicion. The Toad Sage's eyes glowed with understanding before he grinned broadly. I want to show Yang the village from a better point of view. Naruto gave Summer a quick peck on the cheek and nodded in agreement, saying, Go ahead, but hurry, we have to get to the Hokage Tower soon. Then, channeling chakra to his feet, he ran to the closest pole and started running up it. He jumped to the top of a rather tall building while clinging to Yang, who was laughing merrily the whole time. The village could be clearly seen from there. With a joyful smile, he lifted Yang off his shoulders and embraced her once more. Naruto whispered, Do you like your new home, little dragon? The little girl giggled again as she gazed at her father's face with her large, naive eyes. Naruto shared a small laugh with her. I'll take that as a yes. On the opposite side of Konoha in the meantime, a certain kunoichi with pink hair wiped the perspiration from her forehead. As she sat back, the green glow that came from her hands subsided. Sakura Haruno counseled her patient, They're all done. Your leg has been completely healed of injury. Just be sure to be careful while cleaning high areas. An elderly patient with graying hair thanked her briefly before heading out. Sakura muttered as she checked her schedule in her mind, That's the last one for today. She quickly ignored the thought, saying, I decided to take half the day off since Lady Tsunade said that Naruto will finally be back today. I wonder if he has changed at all. Nah, I bet he's still that orange-wearing knucklehead that runs around telling everyone how he's going to become Hokage someday. She quietly chuckled at herself. Sakura put on her regular clothes after changing out of her hospital attire. She wears a circular, patterned red top. This is paired with gray elbow protectors, black gloves, low-heeled, knee-high boots, and black shorts worn underneath a short gray apron skirt. Her shirt and the red fabric of her forehead protector match, and she has a tiny medical pouch on her hip. Sakura hastily leaves the hospital and heads for the Hokage Tower. When she gets there, she waves quickly to the receptionist, who recognizes her and smiles back politely. Sakura made her way through the tower's corridors before coming to a halt in front of the double doors leading to the present Hokage's office. She knocked softly and waited until she heard someone calling for her to come in. Sakura opened a door and looked inside. The only people in the room were two women. Behind a big desk sits a woman with brown eyes, straight, shoulder-length blonde hair tied in two loose ponytails, and a diamond mark that is visible on her forehead. She asked, Am I interrupting anything, Lady Tsunade? Tsunade gave a negative shake of her head. She pointed to the other woman and said, Not at all. I was actually about to send Shizune to fetch you. She is holding a small pig with a pearl necklace in her arms, and her short black hair matches her eyes. Sakura asked as she fully entered the room, So, when is Naruto supposed to return? The blonde woman replied, That's what I was going to send Shizune to tell you about. I just received word that Naruto has been spotted near the village and is expected to arrive soon. We are going to be the ones who meet him. Shizune grinned. I'll be glad to see the little knucklehead again. I wonder if he changed at all. Sakura laughed. Tsunade grinned and said, Knowing him, he probably hasn't changed a bit. I don't know. He may surprise you. He is known as the most unpredictable ninja for a reason, she replied. Come on. I can sense that they have already arrived. Let's go meet them before they get here. Sakura appeared perplexed. Why don't we just wait until they get here? I'm sure Master Jiraiya won't mind walking. Looking into her hand, Shizune laughed. Even as Tsunade started to glare at her, she remarked, Lady Tsunade just wants an excuse to get out of her paperwork. Sakura's expression changed to one of realization, and she started to laugh too. Tsunade simply sighed in defeat and walked to the door, saying, I see. She said wearily, Let's just go already, and walked out. The other two girls trailed behind, still laughing to themselves. Tsunade grabbed Naruto's chakra signature and led the three of them out of the Hokage Tower. They were walking for a few minutes when they saw a girl with black and red hair standing next to a head of white hair they knew. Both of them had their eyes on the top of a building, where a dashing blonde was holding a similarly blonde infant. Sakura watched the unidentified man, her face warming a little. She ignored the slight feeling of familiarity she experienced. His golden hair glinted in the sunlight, and his blue eyes glowed subtly as he gazed at the laughing infant in his arms. She could tell by looking at his bare arm that the man was very toned and that his attractiveness was enhanced by the tattoo on his upper arm. His gaze strayed from the infant and briefly met Sakura's, causing her to freeze. The man's shocked expression soon gave way to a radiant smile, and he leapt out of the building. After landing, The infant continued to giggle loudly and squealed with delight at the sensation of the fall. As the man approached, Sakura's heart began to race. She hadn't even noticed Jiraiya and the unidentified girl following him because she was so preoccupied with the blonde. At last, he came to a halt before her. The pinkette was taken aback by his informal greeting. "Yo, Sakura, it's been a while, huh?" She cursed herself for stuttering in front of the man who appeared to know her name so well. How do you know my name?" she asked herself. Suddenly, a phony expression of agony overcame the man's features, and he clutched his chest. "So cruel, Sakura. I know it's been a long time, but to forget your own teammate is too much for my poor heart to take." He broke down. As Sakura registered his words, her entire world came to a screeching halt. "Hold on a second. Who is this man?" "Naruto." Naruto poked his thumb into his chest and smiled. "That's the name. See, I knew you wouldn't forget me." How? What? As Sakura appeared to struggle with sentence construction, Tsunade remarked, "You sure have changed, brat." She turned to the shorter woman in white and said, "And you must be Summer." Sakura was drawn to Summer's statement, "Yes, that would be me. Naruto has told me a lot about you." Sakura paid closer attention to the newcomer after she had finally recovered from the shock of witnessing her teammate's transformation. Then she became a little envious. For want of a better term, the girl was stunning. She has silver eyes that gleam like the moon and black hair with red highlights that reaches her mid-back. A white high-necked blouse with a red interior was visible through her open white cloak. She is wearing an overbust corset, a black belt with a red border around her waist, and a blouse with brown straps that let her wear a small brown backpack. She is also wearing a black and red combat skirt. She wore thigh-high leggings with an image of a long, stemmed rose on them, which reached a few inches below the hem of her skirt. Each of her black boots with red soles has 4 straps and buckles. There is a single rose-shaped clip on the right shoulder of her cloak. Although she only reached Naruto's chest and was a full head shorter than him, she exuded a sense of height. Nor was her figure anything to laugh at. She was small, with curvy hips, a thin waist, and breasts that were slightly above average. Overall, she was, as previously stated, stunning. Stopping her observations, Summer said, "You must be Sakura." While Sakura was having her inner monologue, she had apparently concluded her conversation with Tsunade. Yes, she said with a little stutter. Summer grinned. Sakura smiled joyfully as she said, "Naruto mentioned a lot about you." However, her smile wavered at her next statement. Summer's smile darkened, and the pinkette's face quickly turned pale. "He also mentioned your habit of hitting him when you were upset. That is something I can no longer allow to continue." As the aura of the silver-eyed girl weighed heavily on them, there was a brief period of sharp silence. Naruto threw an arm around Summer's shoulders and burst out laughing, breaking the sudden silence. "Oh, stop frightening her, Summer. I believe she's had enough now." The menacing grin vanished and was immediately replaced by a sincere, affectionate one. Do I have to? Yang loves it." The half-redhead bitched her lip. As she observed Summer, the infant was indeed giggling joyfully. Shizune, who had been silent, asked a question in response. Upon hearing the question, "I've been meaning to ask, but whose baby is that?" "Tsunade and Sakura." Naruto gave a slight scowl. He raised Yang and placed her close to his face, asking, "Is it really that hard to figure out?" The girl grabbed a bang right away and began chewing on it. He asked, "Now can you figure it out?" Disregarding this, Yang started to cry when she heard the 3 kunoichi yell. "What?" Naruto responded right away. He put her on his chest and started to coo. The smaller blonde soon stopped crying and burst out laughing at her father's attention. He turned momentarily at a tiny puff of smoke. Jiraiya had retrieved a scroll behind him and opened a plush orange fox with slightly worn rabbit ears. After Naruto handed Yang the offered toy, Yang swiftly grabbed it. When the 1-year-old's mouth grabbed hold of the ears and began to chew, it was easy to explain their condition. After dealing with the crying situation, Naruto glared at the reasons behind his daughter's moment. He said in a low voice, but there was a hint of danger in his voice that made the 3 criminals wince a little. Was it really that necessary to yell so loudly? Sakura attempted to defend herself by saying, "We're sorry, and Naruto. We didn't mean to scare her." If their quickly shaking heads were any indication, Tsunade and Shizune felt the same way. However, Naruto continued to glare. When Summer put a hand on Naruto's shoulder, his glare virtually vanished, relieving the brief tension. "Just don't do it again." With a sigh of relief, the 3 medics appeared to have escaped a potentially hazardous scenario. Suddenly, Tsunade developed a playful grin. She had been joking when she asked, "So, who's the mother and when's the wedding?" So she wasn't expecting the blonde to look so agonized. Sensing a shift in her father's attitude, Yang extended her little hands toward him. "Papa." Naruto grinned a little, his gloomy disposition slightly lessening. She instantly started giving him a tight head hug after he pushed her closer. After observing the brief moment of bonding, Jiraiya walked over to Naruto's feet, picked up the tiny toy fox that Yang had dropped, and put it back in its container. Near the end, he addressed Tsunade gravely and said, "I'm afraid that this discussion is not something to discuss in a public location. We'll have to talk in your office if you want to know more." The curvaceous blonde gave a grudging nod. The toad sage merely shook his head, saying, "Okay, but once we get there I want an explanation on why it took so long and I don't want any bullshit." The older man looked at the father-daughter pair and said, "Of course, but as I said before, this is something to be spoken about in private. Besides," he concluded solemnly, then paused, saying, "this is something that Naruto has to do on his own." He looked back again and said, "Well, I wouldn't necessarily say he is totally alone." This time at the small rose who had approached Naruto and given him a tender embrace. In the form of a red rose, there might still be hope for healing his heart. The group arrived at the Hokage Tower quickly because Tsunade appeared eager to return. Naruto surmised that it was because he needed answers. As memories he'd prefer not to think about floated through his mind, the blonde absently rubbed the left side of his stomach. For a brief moment, the vision of a teenage girl with blood-colored eyes and raven black hair was shattered violently. She was not on his mind at the moment. Abruptly, reassuring hands seized him. While the others pulled on the top of his hair from their position on his shoulders, the larger of the two clutched his free hand. With a grateful smile, Naruto returned the squeeze and took Summer's hand. He earned Yang's approval by reaching up and patting his head. A little chuckle. Sakura, Shizune, and Tsunade all noticed this brief moment and responded differently. Because it brought to mind a certain blonde and red-headed couple and what might have been, Tsunade found it to be a rather poignant and melancholic moment. That her little brother had found such a caring family made Shizune happy. Sakura, however, felt a strange sensation rising in the pit of her stomach. She had the same impression as when she saw a girl speak to Sasuke when they were younger. "Am I envious?" She briefly entertained the idea before it was brutally smashed out of her head. "It is impossible for me to ever feel jealous of that jerk." "Correct." Sakura gave herself a very unconvincing nod and pushed the apparent revelation to the back of her mind. Jiraiya had also observed the exchange, but she was more curious about the other girl's response. Shizune and Tsunade were just as he had anticipated, but Sakura's was more humorous. Despite her best efforts, the perverted toad sage was able to read the girl's conflicting emotions with ease. The most obvious ones were envy, jealousy, and a faint yearning. The man with the white hair snorted inwardly. He reflected, "You may have had a chance all those years ago, but you wasted it on that Uchiha boy." Jiraiya looked at the second girl he thought of as a daughter and said, "His heart has already been captured by another. And she will never let him go, in my opinion." Summer and Naruto had a very significant conversation without listening to the other person's ideas or worries. Naruto remarked, "Ichiraku ramen is way better than a simple wok." Yang nodded while perched on his shoulders. She pointed to the smaller blonde and said, "Nah, I refuse to believe anything is better than woks, even Ichiraku." "And you, why are you agreeing with him? You haven't even tried it." She received nothing but a little tongue sticking out at her. She gave a cute little pout in response, and Naruto gave a small laugh. "How about this? We will go and visit Ichiraku's and you eat whatever I order you. Afterwards you'll tell me which you think is better," the brunette suggested. After giving it some thought, Summer nodded her agreement. Her tone was mockingly snobbish as she said, "Very well, that seems adequate enough." The rose burst out laughing when Naruto said, "Hey now, no need for the rich girl act. I got enough of that from Winter. So, you ready to go?" Summer paused her laughter and turned to face the man with the whiskers. "Right now?" The blue-eyed man gave her a cheeky smile. She gave a little squeak when she realized that Naruto was holding her. He said to the two girls, "Hold on tight." Summer put her arms around his neck while Yang clamped down on his head. Then, despite the blonde Hokage's cries for them to return, they were on the move, jumping from roof to roof. A hand clasped Tsunade's shoulder just as she was ready to follow. When she looked back, Jiraiya was shaking his head. For a moment, the curvaceous blonde thought, "Just let them go. I'll make the report and update them later on anything you have to say." With a sigh, she chose to ignore it. Jiraiya nodded firmly as she demanded, "Fine, but you better tell me everything." Tsunade let out another sigh. The 4 shinobi ascended the roofs and hurried to the Hokage Tower, reaching it in a matter of seconds. Let's go. The sooner we get there, the sooner you can tell me. Tsunade came into the office, sat behind her desk, and was ready to order Jiraiya to begin. Only to discover that he was absent, she started to say, "What the?" but was interrupted by a knock on the window. The image of the toad sage crouched outside the window with another silver-haired man holding a small orange book made her spin in her chair and raise an eyebrow. She looked questioningly at the 2 men as she opened the window. Sheepishly, Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head before explaining. Sweating at the strange but apparently true tale, Tsunade opened the door for the 2 men and sat down again. "You see, I was going to follow you, but I ran into a scarecrow watching a black cat and decided to pick him up." Tsunade's expression became solemn as soon as everyone appeared to be at ease. Jiraiya noticed this and did the same. He looked at the 4 other people in the room and cleared his throat. He said. Nods were given, though some were hesitant. "This is not to be spoken with anyone outside the room without my or Naruto's permission. Is that understood?" "Well, it all started 4 months into the training trip. We were traveling when we met a man who called himself Professor Ozpin. Naruto jumped for a minute before he fell from the rooftops and landed in front of a small storefront with its curtains drawn. He exclaimed joyfully, 'Here we are,' as he released Summer, who was flushed, from his embrace. The Rose, who was secretly missing his warmth, rounded on the blonde. With little emotion in her voice, she remarked, 'I could have ran on my own, ya know.' With a sheepish laugh, Naruto attempted to stroke the back of Yang's head but instead rubbed Yang's, who leaned closer to his hand. 'Sorry, guess I got too excited.' Honestly, Summer sighed, speaking in a phony, frustrated tone, 'It's like there are 2 children instead of 1. The blonde smiled cheekily and asked, 'Wouldn't that make you a pedophile?' Summer froze, her features taking on a comical look of shock, and then she simply let out a defeated sigh. The 3 of them went to the shop and opened the curtains, saying, 'Let's just go.' Ayame Ichiraku then greeted them with a smile. She said, 'Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen.' When she noticed the blonde man in front of her, she abruptly stopped short, asking, 'How may I?' 'You're back,' she exclaimed as her eyes grew wide and she hurried around the counter to embrace the Uzumaki. Naruto returned the female chef's hug with a smile. 'It's great to see you again, Ayame.ne. I just got back today and ran into my old teammate and Granny Tsunade.' The brunette asked, 'So you didn't come here first?' as she released the Jinchuriki and gave him a wagging finger and a mock reprimand. 'Tisk tisk tisk, that just won't do, Naruto. I expected better from our number 1 customer.' While Summer giggled at their apparent closeness, Naruto pouted childishly and said, 'Hey, I did come here first. It just took longer than I expected.' This was the Uzumaki's chance to present the Rose. 'Ayame.ne, this is Summer Rose. I met her during the trip and is new to the village.' The chef turned to greet the silver-eyed woman with a smile. 'Nice to meet you, Summer. I hope my little brother didn't bother you too much.' 'Oi, I resent that,' he moaned, his arms crossed. 'Hush, you,' Ayame said. 'The women are talking.' The girls laughed at his predicament as the blonde slumped in defeat. 'It's nice to meet you too, Ayame. I hope it wouldn't be too much trouble for Naruto and I to have a couple bowls of ramen?' Men's voices said, 'Of course it wouldn't,' as a slightly older man emerged from the kitchen. 'Welcome to Ichiraku's and welcome back home, Naruto.' 'Hey there, Pops. Man, have I missed your ramen? I'll take a large miso to start.' After giving a nod, the father chef turned to face Summer. 'And you, Missa?' She replied, 'Summer Rose,' and then went on to say, 'And I'll have one Naruto's having.' He said, 2 miso ramen, coming up, and left the younger stand customers to converse before returning to the kitchen. Ayame said, 'So, who's the little one?' in reference to Yang, who was now contentedly seated in her father's lap. Naruto said, 'This is Yang Uzumaki.' As Ayame took in the blonde's words, her eyes widened. 'That M. Mean, that Y.U, re.' Naruto simply replied, 'Yep.' He already understood what she was attempting to say. 'And she's,' he confirmed, 'Yang is my daughter.' This time, she addressed the Rose, who had been observing the exchange with a sense of amusement up until this point. 'Then are you?' But when the question was hinted at, that humor disappeared. Summer and Naruto both said, 'Yes, no,' at the same time. The silver-eyed girl gave him a startled look, and the Uzumaki scowled a little. The blonde said, 'Yes,' with more conviction this time. As if to emphasize this point even more, Yang extended her little hands and said, 'She may not have given birth to little Yang, but that does not make her any less of a mother.' Summer's eyes watered when she heard the quiet yet clear word, 'Mama.' She briefly wiped her face with her sleeve. When she was done, she gave the two blondes a radiant smile. Naruto leaned over and gave her a quick, passionate kiss, saying, "Thank you. Anytime." Ayame, who had recovered from the startling discovery, smiled slightly as she observed the tender moment. Although she was pleased that her younger brother had found the family he had always desired, she couldn't help but wonder what had become of the birth mother. As they waited for their noodles, the group settled into a cozy silence. When Tucci finally returned with their ramen, Naruto devoured it with his customary zeal, being careful not to appear like a glutton. With her smaller bowl, Yang followed right away, and Summer cautiously raised the noodles dripping from the broth to her lips. She started eating at the same quick pace as the two blondes after enjoying the symphony of flavors that hit her mouth right away. Ayame and Tucci were both aware that they had recently discovered another regular. Naruto paid for their food, and the small family left the store with 2 more bowls for Summer and Naruto and 1 more for Yang. As they gave Summer a brief tour of the village, they came across Jiraiya, who had just concluded his meeting. He told them that tomorrow morning at 7:30, Kakashi Hatake will test Naruto, Summer, and Sakura in a 3-man cell. Naruto had one last question before he left. "How'd they take it?" Jiraiya exhaled. "About as well as you'd expect, but after explaining that you wouldn't want to be pitied, they all agreed to treat you normally." Naruto smiled slightly at the man. "Thank you for that. I don't think I could handle any more pity. My friend's backbeacon gave me enough of that." The white-haired man scratched his head and Jiraiya laughed. "That's what I told them." He smiled mischievously. "Anyway, just do your best tomorrow and make sure to not stay up too late. If you do, well," he said. He left the 2 young adults in a blushing mess after saying, "At least remember to use protection." Naruto's senses returned, and then he had an idea. "Follow me." He took Summer's hand, who was still flushed, and guided her to the training area. To be more precise, they traveled to Team 7's training facility, where the blonde was informed that their test would be held. "And this is my old stomping grounds," he said, waving his hand to indicate the location. "We have access to all kinds of terrain, so we'll be in for a pretty hectic matchup against Kakashi Sensei." As she remembered Naruto telling her about his first attempt at this test, the Rose glanced around. She scowled as she recalled the scene in which Naruto was restrained against the post and not freed until late at night, when Kakashi eventually returned. She dismissed those ideas and then sighed, drawing Naruto's attention. "I know I said I was ready for this, but what do you think, Naruto? And be honest with me." He gave her a blank stare for a second, which made her doubt herself, and then she felt a flick to her forehead. "Silly," he said, grinning. "Of course you'll do great, and of course you're ready. You have all kinds of abilities no one even knows about at your disposal. Not to mention you're insanely fast, so you could easily get out of the way of attacks." She couldn't help but blush at his sincerity and was moved by how much faith he had in her. She gave him a quick peck on the cheek and smiled. He reassured her, "You'll be fine, Summer." As he concluded, a sly smile appeared on his face. "If all else fails, we'll watch each other's backs and work as a team." For a brief moment, she lost herself in those blue eyes before nodding and grinning back at him. "You're right. As long as we work together, we'll get through anything, just like we did back in Remnant." He pumped his fist and exclaimed, "Exactly, so relax. We'll get through this test and we'll pass with flying colors." She matched his fist pump and nodded again. Before they left the training grounds, Yang, not wanting to be left out, did the same, making them both laugh. The 3-member family was unaware that they had been spotted by a set of pale lavender eyes filled with sadness and jealousy. A name slipped from trembling lips and her body trembled. Naruto.kun. On the opposite side of Konoha, a slack-jawed man with black hair shaped like a pineapple sat in the shade of a big elk tree on a hill. His half-lidded eyes drifted freely along their selected paths, drawn to sporadic clouds in the sky. His green Junin vest rustled in the light wind. There was a sigh from the man. If it weren't for the obstinate blonde trying her hardest to talk his ear off, now would have been the ideal moment to nap. Speaking of that blonde, the man's side ached sharply. This caused the man, who was now a little annoyed, to complain. The girl essentially screamed, "Have you even been listening, Shikamaru?" She received nothing but a dismissive wave and a low groan in return. "No good lazy bastards," Ino muttered, letting out a loud sigh. Shikamaru chose to disregard this. Shikamaru nodded indifferently. "I asked if you heard about Naruto returning." "Then have you heard about him having a kid?" Shikamaru asked. His eyes became more alert as he sat up. Even Choji, who had been quietly munching on a bag of barbecue chips, became more attentive. Ino nodded, asking, "Did he now?" "Yeah, Sakura told me about it. Apparently the mom left or something. I don't know, I was still shocked about Naruto having a kid, so I didn't hear part of it. Anyways, now he is supposedly with someone else and is taking care of the kid with that person. The girl finished and left the two boys speechless. After a moment, Shoji questioned, who would have thought that Naruto of all people would have a child first? Ino gave a firm nod. That's what I thought. I mean, we all noticed how dense that idiot was back then. Hell, he didn't even notice Hinata's massive crush on him even though the rest of us did, and now he comes back with not only a girlfriend, but a kid as well, she said with a tone of astonishment. Shikamaru agreed with her right away. He didn't think Naruto would become a parent. With a sudden smirk, he thought fondly, HMPH, unpredictable troublesome blonde, and briefly lost consciousness. He heard Ino say, spar with Kakashi, sensei tomorrow. When Shikamaru said, huh? Ino sighed and Shoji chuckled. The heiress from Yamanaka reiterated, I said that Naruto, the new girl, and Sakura are going to have a spar with Kakashi. Sensei tomorrow. You going? Inquired Shoji. The blonde nodded enthusiastically and uttered. Of course. There's no way I'm going to miss it, besides I have to find out about this mystery girl. Ino's grin broadened. Before she burst out laughing, she remarked, and, judging from Sakura's response when I asked earlier, Naruto has become quite a hunk. The blonde girl left her two teammates behind and said, oh, man. I have to tell everybody, they'll never believe it. So, Shoji said following a pause, are you going to watch? Following some thought, the lazy Nara gave a nod. Yeah, troublesome as it is, it would be nice to see the knucklehead again besides, he said with a long sigh. Most of the rookie 9 will be there if what Ino does what I expect her to. If that happens we have no choice but to go. Shoji gave a low hum. Guess we're going then, huh? Shikamaru sighed once more. Troublesome. Naruto stands in front of his old apartment's open pantry, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment, blissfully unaware of the news that has been spreading due to a certain gossiping blonde named Yamanaka. Yang, who was being held by the rose at the time, laughed at her father's amused expression as Summer stood beside him with a sly smile on her lips. Some people may have been confused by this moment. What in a food cabinet could have been so humorous? This would be fairly simple to explain if you were a Naruto Uzumaki. The blonde Uzumaki had filled the entire pantry with various flavored packaged ramen, rather than the typical canned goods that most people would keep in their cabinet. You know, said Summer, diverting their focus from the ton of noodles, you always said that you had an addiction to ramen when you were younger, but this is ridiculous. Naruto fell into a deep depression. All he received in return was a deadpan look when he asked, it's not that bad, right Yang? As a result, a dark cloud formed over the blonde's head and his depression deepened. His eyes gushed tears like a river from a fountain. Even my own daughter is against me. Summer perspired, and Yang appeared perplexed. Mama Cloud. The young Uzumaki was totally absorbed in the seemingly arbitrary cloud that hung over her father's head. The girl with the silver eyes asked, a little perplexed, you can see it too? She had assumed that she and her former team could see it. She and Kirao found it funny, but Raven always seemed to find it annoying, so he did it more when she was around to get a response from the otherwise unflappable Bronwyn. Daddy seems sad, she said, shifting her focus before too many memories distracted her. Why don't you cheer him up? Summer put the toddler down and watched as she walked unsteadily to the still sulking Naruto. When she arrived at her destination, Yang seized his pant leg and pulled. Naruto turned to face his daughter, and he almost melted when he saw the cute pout on her lips and the big violet eyes that were crying. She whimpered, Papa, up. Despite his tremendous willpower, Naruto instantly gave in to his daughter's flawless puppy dog appearance. The blonde's depression disappeared as he swept her into his arms, and he started to rub his cheek against the young girl, making her giggle sweetly. Naruto cooed, ah, who could resist such a cutie like you? A big, apparently inhuman growl erupted nearby. I certainly can't. The Uzumaki blinked owlishly, then glanced at Yang, who mirrored his expression, before slowly turning to face Summer. Said Rose was hiding her face in her cloak as best she could to conceal the flush that was heating her cheeks. Her gaze briefly met the Uzumaki's before they swiftly turned away. She asked rather than stated, I might be willing to eat that ramen. Before they started laughing, Naruto and Yang exchanged one more glance. Summer's embarrassment was exacerbated by this, and she buried her face deeper in her cloak. Then a louder, even more ominous growl broke the silence. Naruto looked down at his stomach and laughed a little. After a little meal of slightly stale cupped ramen, Naruto reminded himself to send out a few clones later to buy food, and the three of them prepared for bed. I guess I'm a bit hungry as well. The Uzumaki became agitated while Summer was bathing Yang, so he went outside to the terrace and then leapt to the roof. Immediately after, he noticed someone close by and turned to see Kakashi leaning against the rooftop entrance. With his characteristic eye, smile and languid wave, he said, "Yo," to the Jonin. "I figured I'd find you up here." "Is that right?" "Of course, considering you were never really one to rest, even if it was for the simple ritual of going to bed," laughed the Silverette. At that, the Uzumaki gave a sheepish head rub. "Got me there, sensei. So, what's up?" The Jonin approached his pupil and took a seat on the roof ledge beside him. "Lord Jiraiya told me about your newest discovery. I wanted to make sure he wasn't seeing things, no matter how much I trust him." Naruto saw the value in his sensei's concern, but he only scowled a little. Channeling his chakra, the blonde raised his shirt. Kakashi hummed after a moment of staring. Even though he already knew the answer, he asked, "I see, so how did this happen?" Naruto responded, "On the return trip home, anyhow. I accepted an energy I had come across during the trip and was offered a deal in exchange for the ability to use it to the full extent. And that was the price. What was I supposed to do? If I hadn't accepted, then I wouldn't have been able to control it and might have ended up hurting those around me." The blonde appeared to be upset. "And that is something I cannot let happen. No matter what." Without a doubt, following a pause, Kakashi said. He got to his feet. "Anyway, you shouldn't worry about that for now. Just focus on the test we'll have tomorrow and bring your best to the table, Naruto." Kakashi raised a brow as the Uzumaki laughed at that. "Sensei, if I brought my best, then you're going to be in for one hell of a fight. I've learned more than you can imagine on my trip, so you better bring your best." He grinned. "Besides, I'm not the only one you should look out for." After a brief period of silence, the Jonin laughed back and departed in a body flicker. After he left, Naruto remained outside for a few more moments to take in the soft breeze before returning to his apartment room to rest. A warm smile spread across Naruto's face as he walked in. The two most significant individuals in his life were on his bed, snoring softly and snuggled in their pajamas beneath the blankets. Naruto quietly changed into his own pajamas and slipped under the covers behind Summer. He put an arm around each of the girls, drew them in, and kissed their cheeks. The Uzumaki fell asleep after saying, "Good night, little dragon, sweet rose." They were unaware that Summer had been awake the whole time. A tender smile spread across the rose's lips as she melted deeper into his embrace. "Good night, my love. Training grounds 7 tomorrow morning." After meeting up en route, Naruto, Summer, Sakura, and Yang arrived at the designated. Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, and maybe Kakashi, if he truly arrived on time, were supposed to be in the area at 7:30. However, they did not anticipate the presence of the Rookie 9, Team Guy, and their individual senseis. Naruto noticed how his old friends had changed over the years as they watched the unexpected visitors. The most noticeable, at least to him, was Akamaru's sharp growth in size. The white ninja dog stood tall beside his owner, Kiba Inuzuka, now at a startling waist height instead of his previous ankle one. After changing his color palette from gray to black, Kiba wore a form-fitting black leather jacket with sleeves and a chest zip, black pants, and sandals that matched the jacket. His two teammates, Hinata Hyuga and Shino Aburame, were standing beside him. Shino, who hadn't changed much, was wearing a gray jacket that was calf-length and had the hood pulled over his head. He wore round, shaded glasses over his eyes. However, Hinata was a little different from her previous self, currently sporting navy blue pants, black low-heeled sandals, and a loose-fitting lavender and cream hooded jacket with lavender cuffs over mesh armor. In addition, she allowed her hair to grow to her waist. The other teams caught Naruto's attention, and he also noticed that their uniforms had changed. Rock Lee was the only person who had not changed at all, and based on his constant yelling about his fiery passion of youth, it appears that his personality hasn't changed much either. "All right," a voice said, jolting the blonde out of his reverie. Naruto returned to reality and saw that they had already entered the clearing and had probably already been spotted based on the other people's shocked looks. Despite his perplexity, the blonde noted the flush on each girl's face and put the information away for later. But Summer and the young blonde girl in her arms appeared to be the center of their attention. The group of friends started whispering to each other. "Anybody whom I did not mention, clear the testing grounds so that they may begin." Tsunade's voice goes on. "This is the test for the reinstatement of Team 7 with the members Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, and Summer Rose." The other teams and their respective senseis moved to the edge of the tree line so they could watch without interfering. After they had left, Tsunade turned back to the people who were still in the field and said to Kakashi, who had come in secret, "You may begin explaining the rules." Then she leapt back into the trees. After removing Yang from Summer, Jiraiya followed closely behind, followed by Shizune. Kakashi explained, "Well, Then, the same rules as last time apply. There will be only one bell, but the focus of teamwork will still be expected, along with seeing how you've grown, as the other three nodded. Alright then. You'll start when I say so. Naruto, who was reminded of his brazen behavior during the first bell test, was the primary target of this. As his two teammates lowered themselves into a ready stance, the blonde grinned at his sensei. They saw Kakashi draw out a kunai and lift his headband over his Sharingan eye. Begin. As soon as he finished speaking, a glowing projectile blasted past him and into the forest, where it finally exploded, destroying a tree's trunk and sending it crashing to the ground. Kakashi leaned sharply to the side. The silver-haired Junin's wide eyes followed the trajectory of the explosive projectile to his recently returned pupil, where they observed the golden bracelets, which appeared to be ornamental and innocent, change into a pair of gauntlets with crimson spikes lining the knuckles. With a smile on his face, Naruto cocked his arm back into a solid "shoo" chink, and swung his fist forward, hurling another of his glowing explosives at the ground beneath Kakashi. The Junin jumped back to avoid losing his footing. At this moment, he sensed a presence behind him. He swiftly turned and raised a kunai to block a red and white blade, but his eyes widened as the blade effortlessly sliced through the metal. Kakashi avoided being sliced in two by using a swift seal. Less substitution because he didn't have enough time to raise another defense. The sensei of Team 7 congratulated himself inwardly for his prompt intervention, but he perspired a little at the clear intention to hurt, if not kill, him. Even though he managed to avoid the attacks, the Junin couldn't shake the feeling that something was lacking. "I hope you didn't forget about me, Kakashi." "Sensei," the silver-haired man said to himself as he looked upright. Yeah, there were three of them. Kakashi hurried back, unprepared for what Sakura's attack would do next. Her foot cracked under pressure as soon as it hit the ground, then caved in and kicked up a dust and debris cloud. Jiraiya looked dryly at Tsunade from the side. "You made her into a mirror image of yourself." Shizune perspired at his remark, and the Hokage grinned. Who know what kind of trouble Naruto would get into if there wasn't someone like me to keep him in line? Seeing little value in her question, the Toad Sage rolled his eyes. To the best of his knowledge, Summer was equally capable of soothing Naruto without resorting to physical force. Naruto threw himself through the dust cloud, but the former Anbu captain shielded his eyes and missed it. The blonde let his fist fly into the Junin and cocked it back again. Kakashi was flung back by the blast, which exploded upon contact. He quickly rolled to his feet to absorb the blow, recovered, and stopped the sword from slashing him again. Although the blade still managed to cut through half of the metal before stopping, leaving them in a deadlock. Kakashi was able to successfully block the attack this time by making sure to coat his kunai in chakra. He had more time to study the weapon as a result. Even though the grip was worn, the sword was clearly well maintained, and it shone softly in the sunlight as though it had just been polished. The blade itself was straightforward, with only one side sharp and the other blunt. However, the guard, hilt, and coloring were a different matter. Although the blade was mostly white, it had a crimson edge, and the hilt matched the edge's color. The shorter side of the guard was intended to face upwards, while the longer side was intended to face downward, most likely to shield the user's knuckles. But he was unable to make sense of the hilt. It appeared both light and heavy due to a hole at the bottom and a number of strange shifting mechanisms. The Junin had plenty of time to make his observations, even though the deadlock lasted only a few seconds. With the abrupt release of pressure, Kakashi released his hold on his kunai, allowing his opponent to stagger forward before landing a devastating roundhouse that sent the girl flying. Naruto caught her before she could fall to the ground and hurt herself more. In order to give her new teammate time to heal, Sakura immediately sent Kakashi into a taijutsu battle. "Gently, you alright, Summer?" he inquired. With a nod, the rose leapt from his embrace. She gripped the pommel of her sword tightly before reaching back into her cloak and drawing out a second sword with a similar design but different colors. "Yeah, he just caught me by surprise. I won't let it happen again." Naruto smiled with excitement. Summer slowly nodded, not understanding the question. "Remember how we took out the other teams during the tournament at Beacon?" she asked. Her eyes suddenly widened, and she started to smile like the blonde next to her. They left after saying, "Let's do it." As the two started to close in on his position, Kakashi, who had been dodging Sakura's blows, looked over at them. Sakura jumped out of the way of the impending collision while keeping an eye on her teammates. Naruto fired behind him while pointing both of his fists back before the two arrived at the Junin. The blonde's speed abruptly increased as a result, and she was able to land the first punch on Kakashi's bare chest. Before the Junin recovered and started to strike back, Naruto launched a quick combo and delivered a few more blows. For a brief moment, it appeared as though the two were equal, but Kakashi's Sharingan Eye gave him the upper hand. Summer was about to take advantage of a gap in Naruto's attack when he was slashed by the twin swords. The silver-haired Junin was rapidly losing ground now that he had to face both of them, and Summer's swords soon succeeded in slicing through his vest and drawing blood just as Naruto leapt to his feet with a spinning kick that sent the Junin flying and caused his vision to spin. Seeing her opportunity, Sakura leapt at the fallen sensei and punched him hard. Shanaru. As before, the ground gave way under the impact, and if it hadn't been for Kakashi's body exploding into smoke as soon as her fist touched the ground, the Junin would have probably suffered serious injuries. Naruto swore and started to scan the area. Shadow clone. The Rose nodded, and she stretched her senses in an effort to feel him out. Summer, see if you can find him. Sakura and I will defend you. Her silver eyes glowed momentarily, but no one else could see. Suddenly spotting the Junin in hiding, Summer yelled. Jump now. They all leapt into the air without hesitation, just as 3 pairs of hands appeared from the ground, grabbing at their ankles. Summer moved swiftly, driving both swords into the earth, making the clone vanish. Sakura did the same, punching the ground with another punch that broke the earth. They could tell by the popping sound that it was also a clone, so the one beneath Naruto was the authentic one. In the palm of his hand, chakra formed instantly and spun wildly into a ball. He lowered his hand and let loose the devastating jutsu on the floor beneath him. Rasengan. Naruto exclaimed, unleashing his signature jutsu where he thought his sensei should be. Because the earth was unable to withstand the force of his attack, it exploded. Naruto watched to see if he was able to capture his sensei before leaping back out of the ensuing dust cloud. The rookie 9+ team guy stood off to the side and marveled at the battle. What was everyone thinking about? Choji asked, when did Naruto get so good? Stars appeared in Tenten's eyes as she asked incredulously, Naruto, what about that new girl and her swords? They're so beautiful. I'll say. Kiba laughed twistedly, but he abruptly stopped when he sensed a powerful killer intent on him. His gaze was searching for the source when it landed on the towering figure of Jiraiya. However, instead of focusing on the Toad Sage, he was gazing into the bright red eyes of the purported Naruto child. But as soon as he blinked, the children's eyes returned to their typical violet hue. The always perceptive Shikamaru noticed the Inuzuka's trembling form and asked, what has you so scared, Kiba? Kiba appeared momentarily stunned before attempting to laugh it off. He attempted to turn to his teammate for support, but the Hyuga appeared to be out of it for the time being as she gazed at Naruto with a thick flush on her cheeks. Afraid? Haha. Who's afraid? I was just thinking of a funny joke. Alright, Hinata? Shikamaru arched an eyebrow at Kiba's strange actions, but in the end, he chose to end the conversation because he thought it was too troublesome. Naruto.kun has rekindled his inner flame of youth. I shall do the same, starting with 500 laps around Konoha on my hands. If I cannot do this, I must do 1000. Lee exclaimed abruptly, his eyes blazing with passion. Alongside him, an older Lee exclaimed, great idea, my star pupil. His eyes were as passionately lit as his mini clones. I shall join you, but I shall do 5000. We must not allow our youthful flames to die. Neji sighed at the antics of his teammates. While I do not agree with their speech about youth, I must say they are correct about Naruto's improvement, he said to Tenten. His face broke into a grin. It makes me want to train even harder. Tenten gave a nod. I know what you mean. He became so much stronger while he was gone. Almost makes me feel as if all my training was for nothing. She exhaled. Well, I guess that means I'll have to try harder. Though I do wonder where he got those gauntlets and where I can get some. The 2 team guy members jumped a little at the unexpected interruption. He made them himself. The 2 turned on their heels and confronted the Toad Sage. After a long moment of silence, Tenten said, what? The gauntlets, Jiraiya reiterated, he made them himself. The girl with the bunny hair stumbled, W. What, there's no way he made those. He rolled his eyes, the man with the white hair. He narrowed his eyes and said, of course he made. I watched him do it myself. Or do you doubt my word, girl? He asked. No, sir. Good. Neji took a step forward. Jiraiya's eyes softened and he laughed. I would like to apologize for my teammates' behavior, he said, looking at Lee, who was still ranting about the springtime of youth. Both of them. There is no need to apologize, he said, you just need to remember that this isn't the same Naruto you all knew back then. He has been through some tough times and is a changed man because of it. Tenten became agitated over this. The others were intrigued by her question and waited for the Toad Sage's response. That reminds me, Lord Jiraiya, "Is it true that Naruto has a kid now?" she asked. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder and said, "Yep, she's over there with Tsunade." Everyone else looked at the slug princess, who was joyfully bouncing a little girl with blonde hair in her arms. After being given to Tsunade by Jiraiya, who had stated that she needed some time to get to know her great-granddaughter, Yang joyfully giggled at the quick motions. With a breath, Ino said, "That's her. She's so cute," she exclaimed, squealing as she observed the young girl in laughter. "What's her name?" When everyone's gaze returned to Jiraiya, he replied, Yang Uzumaki." "Cute name," said Kiba. The sage gave a nod of agreement, and the discussion paused. Remarkably, Hinata broke the silence by asking, "So, who's her mother?" Jiraiya scowled pitifully. "I'm not one you should be asking, but her name was Raven Bronwyn." They returned their focus to the battle at hand when they heard a roar. A huge earth dragon that Kakashi must have just called forth appeared to have forcibly cleared the dust from Naruto's Rasengan. Shikamaru saw right away how he phrased his response, was, "Now that is something you should ask Naruto. I'm afraid I can't say anything else on the matter other than that she is no longer with us." The group became solemn as the white-haired man's frown deepened. The slothful Nara gave a nod of comprehension, but he kept his thoughts to himself. "No longer with us. Therefore, she either died or departed." He sighed, "I suppose I'll have to ask Naruto for more details." Troublesome. Shikamaru chose to ignore the question and attentively listened to the assessment. When Naruto's attack kicked up a huge cloud of dust, he squinted his eyes. He tried to find his sensei and looked into it. He was informed that the Junin was still in fighting condition by a strong chakra pulse. Naruto stood with Summer and Sakura, preparing his stance again, and waited for Kakashi. But he wasn't prepared for the massive rock-made dragon to emerge from the dust cloud and collide with him. "Naruto!" exclaimed Summer anxiously. Just as the fireball struck him and sent him flying, Naruto, gasping at the sudden pain, flipped over the dragon's head and ran down its length before jumping off his tail. Naruto got up and gave the silver-haired Junin a light glare, but he made the error of looking directly into Kakashi's Sharingan. As the sky grew dark and the world vanished around him, the red eyes Tomo's whirled languidly. It didn't take Naruto long to realize he was ensnared in a genjutsu. The Uzumaki placed his hands in the ram sign and said, "Huh? You'll have to do better than that, Kakashi." "Sensei." However, before he could use the chakra required to break the genjutsu, a voice that was eerily familiar spoke. "It's been a while, Uzumaki." Naruto turned slowly in disbelief and gazed into Raven Bronwyn's scarlet eyes, his erstwhile lover. Summer was unaware of what transpired. Naruto appeared to be having a great time sparring with his old sensei one moment, and then he was stooped over, his hair casting shadows over his eyes the next. His fist clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and his body trembled. He let out labored breaths and his left eye began to well up with tears. The Rose was quite alarmed by this and was ready to run to his side when he abruptly straightened. His quiet voice sent shivers down their spines as he said, "You really shouldn't have done that, Kakashi." His tone became increasingly emotionless as he said, "You could have performed any other kind of genjutsu, but now you've gone and made the wrong decision." Eventually, Sakura and Kakashi started to feel afraid. Summer looked on in quiet concern. Although she knew that something had obviously upset Naruto and that it had to do with Kakashi's genjutsu, she could never be afraid of him. However, what might have been in that delusion for Naruto to cry so much? Since then, she hadn't seen him like this. Raven. As she started to piece together what had happened, her eyes widened. Naruto must have lost emotional control after Kakashi showed him something about the Bronwyn. It started to make more and more sense as she gave it more thought, and the more sense it made, the more irate she became. Kakashi ought to have realized better than to show Naruto that kind of thing. It would only have a detrimental effect on his mental health and destroy everything she and Jiraiya had worked so hard to achieve. Before forcing it back down, Summer felt a growl rise in her throat. Anger at the silver-haired Junin was not warranted at this moment. She needed to keep her attention on Naruto and prevent him from going crazy. She chose not to attempt to stop him from fighting Kakashi, though. Eliminating the source of his negative feelings would be beneficial. She wouldn't object to the idea of the Junin being somewhat roughed up, but she wouldn't say she would stop Naruto from murdering or disfiguring his own sensei. A few bruises and cuts, possibly some fractures. What? Even though Summer has a good heart, you would be lucky to escape punishment if you hurt anyone she cares about, particularly Naruto and Yang. She was fiercely protective of the people she valued. She tensed, ready to move if necessary, as the sound of quiet footsteps brought her attention back to the impending confrontation. Naruto's face gradually emerged from the shadow of his bangs as he approached Kakashi. The Junin almost felt his heart stop when his eyes were revealed. Kakashi took a step back because of Naruto's right eye, but his left eye remained the same brilliant blue as before, albeit without any emotion. An unusual symbol began above his eye and ended in a point beneath it, while his iris was encased in a dark crimson, nearly black, hue. The Junin perspired from the intensity of the dark energy that whirled menacingly around the Uzumaki. Tsunade worriedly asked Jiraiya, "What's happening?" The Toad Sage let out a sigh. "Kakashi just signed an all-expense-paid trip to the hospital for a few days. That's what's happening." Shizune inquired, worried about her younger brother figure. "What do you mean?" Jiraiya calmly said, "Just watch." He directed this final statement at the teams and their senseis. "And whatever happens, do not interfere." Even though the Junin senseis appeared repulsive, they all nodded their agreement and complied with the Toad Sage's instructions. Yang watched her father out of the adult's line of sight, her face displaying obvious concern. "Papa." According to Kakashi, Naruto. Heterochromic eyes gazed at him without emotion. "We can talk about this, right? No need to resort to violence." It was an honest mistake. He was about to continue when his stomach began to hurt. Kakashi traced the leg back to its body, where he finally met the Uzumaki's eyes, while looking down in disbelief at the foot stuck in his stomach. I was completely unable to respond to his movements. Incredulously, the Junin thought. Although his body was unable to respond in time to Naruto's insane speed, his Sharingan had been able to see the blonde move. Kakashi staggered away from the offending limb, coughing up a little blood through his mask. But they didn't give him time to heal. His jaw began to hurt, and then he was in the air. He whirled in the air, gritting his teeth. Even though he had once more seen his movements, he was still unable to respond quickly enough. Kakashi reached into his pouch and threw 2 kunai as hard as he could at the blonde. Naruto watched passively as the kunai shattered against his skin without attempting to dodge them. Ignoring the Junin's disbelieving gaze, Naruto vanished from view, moving a little more slowly than before but still too quickly for Kakashi's wounded body to protect itself. The silver-haired man who appeared behind the Junin could only observe as a hand came down in a chopping motion. Kakashi was brutally implanted into the ground, shooting into it like a bullet. With his knees pressing him deeper into the earth, Naruto, still unfinished, allowed gravity to drag him to the ground and land on the Junin's back. The Uzumaki stepped off the man and grabbed Kakashi's hair, holding his lifeless body in front of him with one hand. He extended his other hand and a Rasengan started to take shape. This was distinct from the others, though, because it was surrounded by tiny, white blades that resembled shurikens and made a low screech sound. Knowing the specific jutsu Naruto was about to use, Jiraiya was ready to intervene because, despite his significant underpowering, the jutsu was still too dangerous to use on another Leaf Nin. He had already seen a certain Rose on the move, so there was no need for him to take any action. He told Tsunade, "Get ready to get Kakashi out of there." With a nod, the blonde Hokage turned to Shizune. Shizune shook her head and awaited her turn. "As soon as there is an opening, get Kakashi and bring him quickly to me. I must run a quick analysis on his injuries before we take him to the hospital so that he may be treated." Naruto was about to plunge his Rasengan into the Junin's chest after feeling that he had added enough chakra to it when he was suddenly overcome by a familiar warmth from behind and lost his hold on Kakashi. Shizune quickly picked up the now unconscious man and carried him to Tsunade after he fell limp to the ground. Summer said, "Naruto," in a quiet voice, but with a firmness that caused the blonde to freeze. Naruto's crimson eye began to regain its original color, losing some of its crimson black hue. "That's enough now. There is no need to do any more harm. Think about Yang." The blonde looked at the young girl and said, "You wouldn't want to see her upset at the sight of you killing, would you?" The young blonde's lips trembled in a barely contained cry, and tears threatened to spill from her watery violet eyes. The marking around his eye gradually disappeared, and he returned to his usual self. He whispered, "Yang." Naruto was so exhausted from using his power that his body started to sway and his eyes closed. He felt himself fall as his legs failed him, but his limp body was supported by the arms that were wrapped around him, so he never touched the ground. Tired blue met gleaming silver as he struggled to turn his head. Before his mind and body shut down and he was pulled into the shadowy embrace of unconsciousness, he managed to say, "Thank you." He heard a gentle and kind voice assuring him that everything would be all right just before he completely passed out. 2 people are seated beneath the shade of one of the numerous red-leafed trees deep within the crimson depths of the Forever Falls forest. With their hands clasped together and one leaning heavily on the other, the two sat fairly close to one another. One figure, A man with blue eyes and spiked blonde hair laid his head on top of the other's darker hair. The other leaned against his shoulder. She was a woman with black night hair and, at the moment, closed eyes that matched the color of their surroundings. The decaying remains of several Grimm species surrounded the pair. You know, most girls would like to be taken to a fancy restaurant or go on a nice picnic as a date, the man said. With her eyes still closed, the girl thought, well, I'm not like most girls. The man deadpanned, but the woman didn't notice because her eyes were still closed. Yes, you made that abundantly clear when concussed that poor man when you thought he was leering at you. She opened her eyes and looked at the blonde, huffing, HMPH, you would have done the same had you been there yourself. Shut up. See. He looked around at the almost faded Grimm bodies and sighed, you still haven't told me why you took me here. Other than the obvious. What's on your mind, Raven? The blonde glared at her, asking, and what makes you think I have anything to tell you, Naruto? Because, ripping off the skulls of a Beowulf and shoving it up the ass of an Ursa is not normal behavior, even for you. Raven exhaled. Well, you know we've been dating for 2 years now, right? He raised an eyebrow and said, of course. Our anniversary is in 2 weeks. What of it? He asked. Yes, well, you see the thing is, during those 2 years, we've, done some stuff. Now both brows were up. Is Raven Bronwyn, the typically calm and mature badass, faltering? What about it? He said with a playful smirk. Still upset you can't keep up? No. The girl almost exclaimed, her cheeks flushed. Naruto turned a healthy shade of red as he said, I mean, not that. I was talking about the results of you, finishing inside. He concluded, a little perplexed, why? Yeah, I know what's supposed to happen after yeah, but I thought you were on the pill? Well, I guess you're more fertile than you thought. Oh, okay, I may have forgotten last time. When the red-eyed girl nodded, Naruto trailed off, wide-eyed, so that means. Then there was a sharp silence between them. He said at last. I guess that explains the mood swings. Raven gave him a disbelieving look. That's all you have to say? Naruto shrugged and asked, what, you thought I would be upset about it? He grabbed the upset girl and gave her a tight hug to emphasize his point. I'll admit that I'm surprised, but I'd never leave you for something like this. I know that I don't have much, or any really, experience in parenthood, but I won't let you do this on your own. I'll be there every step of the way. The resolve in his voice caused Raven to take a single, sharp breath. He meant this. He would not leave her to raise a child by herself. With a sigh, she buried her head deeper in the blonde's arms as a huge burden was removed. He wouldn't, of course. She was referring to Naruto here. In times of need, he would never abandon a friend or anyone else to fend for themselves. One of the things that initially drew her to him was that quality. She was on the verge of a panic attack when an idea suddenly came to her. Breaking the tender embrace, Raven bounded up and got to his feet to pace. Meanwhile, Naruto watched in confusion as the mood abruptly changed. His tone reflected his bewilderment, and Raven heard it. What's wrong? Did I do something to make you upset? She was quick to reassure him, saying, no, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just, she said with a sigh as she combed through her dark hair. What are we going to tell the team? Am I going to have to leave Beacon? How will we find the support to raise a child? Naruto paled as another question sprang to mind, and his eyes widened at the inquiries. Raven's panic almost doubled when he said, what is Kirao going to do? But then she calmed down a little after giving it some thought. Kirao won't be a problem. I'll talk to him. But what about the rest? She replied. How about Summer? She considered adding, but changed her mind. Despite their long friendship, Naruto, being the blind fool that he is, was unaware of the Rose's feelings. Besides, she told herself, she had already missed her opportunity. When 2 arms encircled her waist and drew her closer, her thoughts stopped. He's mine now. Naruto comfortingly whispered into her ear, we'll handle the others together, okay. Leaning her head back onto his shoulder and placing her hand on top of his, Raven eased herself into his arms. She said, right, together. After Raven stayed in his arms for a moment longer, she whirled away from him, took Naruto by the arm, swept his feet from beneath him, and sat on his chest. The abrupt movement made Naruto groan, and he cast a suspicious glance at the girl with the raven hair. With her dark hair hiding their faces from the outside, she leaned over from her position on him and gave the blonde a sly smile without saying anything. Now, before we do all that, I believe this is the first time we've been alone in over a week and I think it's about time you scratch a certain itch of mine, nay? Naruto almost lost control from the way she spoke and the way her breath tickled his ear. But he suppressed his hormones and asked, somewhat tensely, "Are you sure you want to do this here?" Raven started to nibble on his earlobe, her smile remaining unwavering. "Why?" Her question made his eyes darken with desire and sent chills down his spine. "It's not like we haven't done it outside before. Besides, I think it's kinda hot." When she lowered her hips and grounded down on his expanding bulge, Naruto, who had already reached his breaking point, lost it. Her crimson jacket was ripped from her shoulders as he quickly sat up and devoured her lips. As they broke the kiss to catch their breath, Raven smirked and said, "Bit hasty, aren't you? You know, if I didn't know any better I would think you only want me for my body." "Of course not. I love you for you." Though, the blonde laughed. His hands moved to her butt and squeezed it tightly. Under his supervision, Raven found it difficult to contain her groans. This is just an added bonus. Eventually, she gave in and tried to use his mouth to stifle her voice. The Bronwyn broke away again, whispering, "Naruto, I lo." The girl interrupted abruptly, and Naruto blinked as her expression shifted from one of affection to one of shock. He looked down and felt his heart stop as he felt warm liquid trickle down the front of his shirt. A pale hand with black veins running through it, covered in blood, protruded through her stomach. Raven tried to speak again, but he was still so stunned that he nearly missed it. Run. Naruto looked up sharply from the hand and stared at the girl in shock and disbelief as her crimson eyes turned silver and red traces ran into the ends of her hair. Have to get out of here, and Naruto. Her body exploded in black smoke and dispersed in the wind before he could object. What? Naruto gasped, still unable to understand. The surrounding forest abruptly disappeared, to be replaced by a limitless black emptiness. Apparently from everywhere around him, a gentle voice with a hidden sarcastic undertone said, "Foolish little boy. Did you really think you could escape me?" Naruto cried out, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The voice chuckled menacingly, "You know exactly who I am, boy." He imagined red eyes with black sclera and felt a hand beneath his chin. He was immediately overcome by rage. Naruto demanded, "You? What the fuck do you want? How are you inside my head?" The voice gave a mocking laugh. "All will be answered in due time. For now you should wake up. I believe your teacher has things to discuss with you." He screamed angrily, "What do you mean in due time? Answer me," but it was too late. He could already feel his dream world fading away. When Naruto's eyes opened, he sprang up from his lying position. His senses were overwhelmed by a huge headache, so he covered his face with his hand. The anger from his dream or nightmare morphed from a raging conflagration to a persistent hum in the recesses of his consciousness. Naruto blinked at the liquid on his palm and withdrew his hand from his head. Crying, he reflected to himself. He could see from the burning in his eyes that it had been doing so for some time, and a quick swipe to his cheeks indicated that more were still leaking out. The sudden noise startled the blonde, who quickly wiped his face and turned sharply to his side. "Yo, it seems you're awake now, Naruto?" she asked. Kakashi was reading a little orange book while sitting up in his bed. His headband rested on a small table next to him, but his trademark face mask still covered the lower portion of his face. His left eye stayed closed to avoid wasting chakra needlessly, and his other open eye languidly drifted to his pupil. "I expected you to wake up much sooner, but I guess that mark of yours took more out of you than I thought." He simply sighed. "Just goes to show what happens when you use a power you don't have any experience for." When Naruto realized what had happened, he blinked. He mentally cursed himself, recalling how he had lost control. He started to say, "Kakashi. Sensei, I'm sorry but the Junin interrupted him with a hand. Before his face hardened, he said simply, "It's fine. While I did not say it, it was implied to come at me with the intent to kill. You just happened to get closer than the others. However, you need to get a hold on those emotions. Chunin Uzumaki. If you lose control like that in a real fight, then it's possible for your anger to be taken advantage of. You wouldn't want to leave Yang fatherless, would you?" He was being facetious. Naruto cast a pitying and irritated glance down at his hands. He clenched his fists in his lap and said, "I know." Seeing his student's condition, Kakashi sighed, "I know, but it's just so hard. Every time I think of her I just..." The silver-haired man said, "You know," drawing Naruto's attention. He gestured next to the blonde, briefly perplexing him before he felt a hand resting on his thigh and something small resting against his side. "You're not alone in this. You have friends to talk to and help you, not to mention a family." Naruto saw Summer and Yang's sleeping faces when he looked down. With her head resting in one arm and her hand extended toward him, the Rose was sitting in a chair beside his bed. Yang, however, had her arms and legs firmly encircling his side as she tried to use him as a body pillow. When he saw Naruto complete his observations, Kakashi remarked, "They've been here since yesterday, you know." "How long was I out?" "Don't know. I just woke up myself, but if I had to guess, I would say it's probably been a little over a day." Naruto was taken aback. A whole day? To what extent did his newfound power drain him? Naruto nodded solemnly, saying, "I see you're starting to realize the consequences of your actions." "Good," Kakashi said with his trademark grin. "The sooner you understand this, the better you'll become." As Kakashi returned to his book, the blonde fell into pensive silence. Except for the perverted giggles that occasionally came from the silverette, the room was silent. A sudden thought came to him about something the Junin had said earlier. "Wait, Chunin?" Sheepishly, Kakashi looked up from his book. "Oh, you caught that? I was actually hoping you missed it." "Come on, Kakashi. Sensei, weren't you the one who always told me to look underneath the underneath?" "Yes, but I never thought you actually listened to me back then." The blonde said, "Hey, I know I was bad when I was younger, but I'm much more mature now." He was deadpanned by Kakashi. The deadpan remained fixed on his face as Naruto turned to the side and pouted, childishly crossing his arms. "What? I am," he exclaimed. "The silver." Hair Junin laughed and said, "You could have at least been a little nicer about it, Dadbeo." Naruto glanced down at Summer Rose's drowsy face and said, "You're not doing a good job at telling him otherwise, ya know." The Rose smirked at him, and the blonde gave her a deceived look. Naruto remarked sarcastically, "Not you too," as Kakashi and Summer both laughed at his bad luck. After a moment, the laughter subsided. "The silver-eyed girl asked in a worried tone, "So, how do you feel?" The blonde gave a shrug. "Other than feeling slightly drained, I'm completely fine." "Good," the Rose answered with a smile. "Because that means I can do this," she said with a slap across the back of his head, her smile flipping. "Itai. What was that for, Summer?" She startled the blonde by yelling or whispering, "Where do you get off on worrying us like that?" Kakashi laughed in the background, and then the small girl came around on him too. "Did you not think about how we felt before you went all willy-nilly?" he asked. She continued to use her loud whisper as she exclaimed, "And you? What were you thinking when you used such a genjutsu on Naruto? If I hadn't stopped him, he could have seriously, if not fatally, injured you." Even though Kakashi was polite enough to appear a little sheepish, he couldn't help but perspire. As he watched her turn back to Naruto and continue reprimanding him, he thought, "She reminds me way too much of Kushina." Summer eventually sat back down in a huff after running out of things to say. This was noticed by Naruto, who was massaging his irritated head. The girl was pulled from the chair and into his arms by his outstretched hand. After a moment of resistance, she yielded to the blonde's more powerful hold. He started to gently rub her hair after noticing that she had stopped wriggling. With a satisfied sigh, the Rose gave a cute munya and tucked herself deeper into the blonde's embrace. Finally, Naruto said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you like that." This time, Summer sighed in frustration. They both turned to face the girl who was still sleeping. "It wasn't just me you had worried, it was Yang too." Even if she didn't understand why, she still knew her father was upset. She wouldn't let anybody but me touch her or feed her, and she absolutely refused to leave your side. The Rose gave a little giggle. She's definitely a daddy's girl. As Summer spoke and laughed at the conclusion, Naruto grinned adoringly and kept his eyes fixed on the sleeping blonde. The answer was, yep, it would seem so. The couple then fell silent as they enjoyed each other's company. After giving his students a brief moment of camaraderie, Kakashi returned to Reading. When a nurse finally stopped by to see how they were doing, she noticed that both of them were awake. The nurse quickly returned with the blonde Hokage after leaving to tell Tsunade. Sakura followed, glancing at the couple's position with mild envy before averting her eyes before anyone could notice. "So, the sleeping beauty awakens. It's about time. I was beginning to think it would never happen. Then I'd never be able to give you your surprise." Tsunade laughed. The blonde's mouth fell open as she asked, "You mean about me being a Chunin? Kakashi accidentally told me." The aforementioned Junin dutifully remarked, "Way to sell me out, Naruto." Tsunade scowled at the silverette as the Uzumaki shrugged. Dangerously, she said, "Really, Kakashi?" The man simply grinned without listening to the Senju's tone. The Hokage casually slapped a hand against her forehead and dragged it down her face after he said, "Oops." "Whatever," she let out a sigh. "Since you already know and everyone's here, I guess I can tell you." Everybody in the room looked at the blonde woman curiously. They were all thinking the same thing, and Naruto said, "Tell us what, Granny?" They were all taken aback when they heard, Team 7 has a new mission. Naruto whimpered, "What, so soon? We just got back. Normally I would let you wait a few days in order for you to settle in, but this is rather urgent. Sasuke Uchiha has been spotted by our spies near the edge of Wave Country. He was seen accompanied by 3 others who seemed to work with or under him. Your mission is to travel to there and confront the rogue Uchiha and his associates before and attempt to negotiate in order to bring him back. If he refuses, you are authorized to use force, lethal if necessary." Tsunade told them. She glanced around to see if anyone would object to her final statement and found that everyone was resolute except for Sakura's slight hesitancy. "Good," she said, turning to face Summer and Naruto. After saying her part, the female Hokage turned on her heel and walked out of the room. Sakura hurried after her. "I have arranged for Shizune to look after Yang while you two are away. All of you will be packed and prepared to move out at the village gates in 2 hours, dismissed." Kakashi got out of bed after snapping his book closed, before he disappeared in a whirlpool of leaves, leaving the 2 or 3 if you include Yanga alone. He said merrily, "I guess I'll be on my way as well, Yane." "Are you sure you're ready to fight your old teammate?" Summer asked, her blue eyes meeting Naruto's, and Naruto nodded without hesitation. "Yes. I may have considered him a friend before, but Sasuke has already chose his path when he betrayed me in order to fulfill his goals of revenge. Besides, I have a new family and even more friends. I don't need him, and if he attempts to harm anyone I consider family, I will not hesitate to end him," he said as his voice got darker. In agreement, the Rose shook her head. "And if he intends to shove another lightning-covered fist through your chest, then all both my swords will accidentally be shoved down his throat." Hummed Naruto, raising an eyebrow. "Getting a little protective, aren't you?" "Someone has to." Summer rolled her eyes and laughed, but then she yelled when she felt a pinch in her side. "You always seem to have trouble looking after yourself after all." When the Uzumaki turned away with a false sense of innocence, she gave him a fierce look. She reached up to his face and gave his whiskered cheeks a light scratch as a sudden, sly grin appeared on her lips. At her touch, Naruto instantly melted and started making strange, purring-like sounds of satisfaction. He gave her a feeble glare and said, "You're evil." Summer just gave a cheeky smile. "I know." She then bent down and gave him a passionate kiss, putting an end to any further objections. If one were to look at the entrance gates of Konoha, they would see 5 people watching a heartwarming but very funny scene of a father worrying about leaving his daughter behind. "Do you have the diapers?" "Yes." "What about food? Is there enough of that?" "Yes." "My scroll number in case you need to contact me?" "Yee." "Wait, what?" From the side, Jiraiya remarked, "She doesn't know what a scroll is, Naruto." "I thought you told them everything," Naruto yelled as he rounded on him, waving his arms in a humorous manner. The white-haired man shrugged and said, "I might have left out a few details. It's fine. If anything happens I'll still be here." "Yeah, but..." Summer touched the blonde's shoulder, and he sighed in resignation following a silent struggle of wills. "Fine, just take good care of her, Shizune. Pervy sage." Shizune nodded and said resolutely, "Of course. I shall do my utmost best to keep her safe." After bowing his head in gratitude, Naruto turned to face the petite blonde. Her violet eyes gazed up at him with sorrow, and the sight of her watery orbs almost made him stay and yell, "Fuck you," to the mission. Rather, he persisted and drew her away from Shizune's embrace, giving her a firm embrace. He whispered, "You're going to have to stay strong for daddy, okay?" Yang looked at her father resolutely and nodded, saying, "I'll be right back after I kick the bastard's ass." She said, "Daddy, kick ass." Naruto laughed, but his laughter was cut off when he felt several menacing auras. With a tense laugh, he returned Yang to Shizune's embrace. "That's right, but daddy really needs to go now before daddy gets his ass kicked," Naruto replied. Still in the third person. Sweat trickled down his face as the gloomy aura intensified. After saying, see you later, gotta go bye," he hurried out of the gates, leaving a dust cloud in his wake. 2 more dust trails and twin cries of Naruto soon followed him. The others turned to the final team member after watching this scene with amusement. After a brief glance back at them, Kakashi closed his book and tucked it into his pouch. Tsunade said, "I've already informed you of the mission parameters, but there is something I would like to add. Be on a lookout for the Akatsuki. There's no doubt that they have heard about Naruto's return and is planning on going after him. With all the other Jinchuriki being captured or missing, it is safe to assume Naruto is next. Protect him at all cost. There is no telling what they have planned once they have acquired all of the tailed beasts." Kakashi raised his eyebrows. "Understood." The silver-haired Junin said, "Good, then you are dismissed," and left, trailing the quickly vanishing members of his team. Jiraiya remarked, "You know they'll be fine, right? Despite what you might think, Naruto has matured in his time away. Parenthood does that to you." Tsunade sighed and said, "I know. I just can't help but get a bad feeling about this mission. Naruto doesn't exactly have the best track record, ya know." The pervy man reassured her, saying, "Just have a little faith. I'm sure everything will be fine." "I hope, for his sake and Yang's, that you're right," the blonde sighed once more. A giant, earthen, colored humanoid creature with a tattered appearance, a body shaped like a robe, and several spike-like protrusions on its back sat against the back wall at the far end of the cave in an unidentified location, deep within the dimensions of an abnormally large cave. 7 of its 9 eyes were open, and a blindfold was wrapped around its head. 6 holographic figures stood atop the fingers of the statue's shackled hands. A man whose only distinguishing characteristics were his ripple-like eyes and spiky hair said, "It seems the Kyuubi has finally returned. Now we may finalize our goals." With a big sword sticking out over his shoulder, another man said, "'Bout time the brat got back. I was beginning to think he had run away." "Ha ha ha ha," screamed the figure wielding a huge tri-bladed scythe. "Now I can finally sacrifice the little fucker to Lord Jashin." "Calm down, Hidan. I heard that the boy had amassed quite the bounty while he away. I must have his head." Hidan shouted, "Shut the fuck up, Kakazu. Nobody gives a shit about your stupid bounties." Kakazu retorted, "And nobody cares about your ridiculous sacrifices. That is enough, you two." A woman's voice cut in. "Now is not the time for your childish arguments. We have work to do. We must capture the Uzumaki and we have to discover the whereabouts of the Hachibi as well." "K," sneered the man with the sword. "If I remember correctly, it was the immortal idiot's fault that the 8 tails got away in first place." "At least my partner is still alive," exclaimed the Jashinist. "Oi, fuck you, Kisame." Kisame snarled but remained silent. The ripple-eyed man's deep voice interrupted, "Enough. Like Conan said, this is not the time to argue. Besides, I have already gathered the means necessary to capture the Kyuubi and Zetsu is currently working on uncovering the location of the Hachibi." "Oh," was the tone, "and do you plan on sharing this amazing plan with the rest of us, oh great leader?" "That information is confidential." The Akatsuki leader disregarded the swordsman's overtly sarcastic tone. "Right now you will travel to Nami no Kuni and meet up with your new partner." "New partner?" inquired Kisame. "Who is it?" The man with the purple eyes said hazily, "Someone whom you are quite familiar with." Kisame nodded despite grunting at the lack of information. The holograms started to scatter one by one until there was just one left. "The rest of you will remain on standby until you are told otherwise." Dismissed. The swordsman only stayed for a second before vanishing as well. Kisame opened his eyes and looked around. He was perched atop a big rock near a river on the outskirts of a verdant forest. He was a little annoyed by the area's relative calm. The man, who appeared to be speaking to no one, scratched at his dark blue hair. "So, you got all that?" Kisame asked as the air rippled to his left shoulder and a second man emerged behind him. He had 2 bangs framing his face and long black hair pulled back into a low ponytail. "Of course." The individual replied, "Despite it being vague, I was still able to gather the information necessary to report back. TCH, it still amazes me that you of all people would fake your death and betray the Akatsuki." Kisame replied. "Besides, weren't you the one who kept going on about wanting to die by your precious little brother's hands?" "I have a debt to pay, so I can't afford to die right now. Not even by my foolish little brother," the man replied bluntly. The blue-skinned man grinned and said, "Hey, you're one cold bastard, Itachi." The Uchiha said stoically, "I have no idea what you are talking about." Kisame rolled his eyes and said, "Of course you don't." He started to get up and said, "Well," emphasizing the word, "new partner, I guess it's time to go meet this new partner of mine." Itachi said, "Then I must take my leave as well." Kisame dismissed him with a wave. The swordsman did not intimidate Itachi in the least. Yeah. Just go do your thing before I decide to give Samahata another taste of your chakra." Nevertheless, he made the decision to leave. After all, he had a significant piece of information to share even though there wasn't much about plans for the future. Their first target was Akatsuki, who was once again active. Was Uzumaki Naruto. The new Team 7 was spotted standing together by a tree in the woods outside of Wave. Well, everyone on the team except Naruto was standing. In contrast, the Uzumaki was lying in the grass with smoke streaming from his battered body and several painful looking but humorous bumps sticking out of his blonde hair. Kakashi dutifully said, without even raising his eyes from his book, I know what Naruto said was stupid and irresponsible, but was beating him that much really necessary? We still need him for the mission. In response to his worries, Summer said, he'll be fine in a second. He's gotten worse from Professor Goodwitch when he fell asleep in class back at Beacon. Besides, Sakura said, huffing in frustration and crossing her arms. The idiot deserved for teaching an innocent girl such a dirty word. With weakness, the idiot in question stated, but it was an accident. The Rose said sharply, yes, an accident that will never happen again. Got it, Naruto? He gave a nod. Got it. Then, as if by magic, the blonde leapt to her feet, and the bruises and bumps disappeared so quickly that one might assume it was all a performance. Saluting the Junin, he pivoted on his heel and said, Shunin Naruto Uzumaki reporting for duty. With a sigh, Kakashi put his little book in his pouch. With a cheeky smile, the Uzumaki asked, just how long have you been waiting to use that line? The Silverhead rolled his eye. The others became serious and focused entirely on him when he said, putting aside Naruto's antics, I think it's time to begin the operation. Reluctant to use the new term, Summer confirmed, we're ready. Sensei. Something Kakashi noticed right away. Just call me Kakashi or Hitaki if you wish to be formal. It'll make it much easier on the both of us if you did. The Junin offered. Besides, I haven't taught you anything so you have no reason to address me as such. The man-eye grinned as the silver-eyed girl nodded and said, very well, Kakashi. Well, that's settled, let's get started. According to our intelligence, Sasuke was spotted traveling through Wave with 3 other people, 2 men and 1 woman, 2 of whom were male and 1 of whom was described as being very large in size and having very distinguishable orange hair. Naruto's eyes brightened at the man's hair color, but he held back from speaking. The other male was reported to be smaller in size, but no less unique. He has white hair and shark-like teeth, much like that of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. The final member of group has red hair with matching eyes and glasses. No other information about their appearances seem to be available other than what I have just told you. So, what you're saying is that, other than what color hair they have, we have nothing on their abilities or fighting styles? Summer responded with skepticism. No, said Kakashi gravely. The 3 listened intently, leaning close. His final words, they also have matching cloaks, caused them to collapse on their faces with joy. Being the first to get better, Naruto yelled and poked him with a finger. What the hell, sensei? I thought you were being serious. The Junin appeased Naruto by saying, now, Naruto. It was just a joke. TCH, the blonde said with a sneer and his arms crossed. Kakashi said, whatever, it wasn't even funny, TTEBAO. He gave his neck a sheepish rub before putting on a straight face again. Since we don't know their current location, we'll have to do a little scouting. Summer, Sakura, I want you 2 to investigate where the group was last spotted. Ask around and see if somebody has seen anyone that matches any of their appearances. Naruto, you're with me. We will be checking out the outskirts near the bridge. I'll summon Pakun to see if he can pick up any of their scents. Sakura interrupted with a question. Sensei? Doesn't your dog need a scent to track somebody in the first place? Naruto reached into his pouch and took out a small scroll, saying, oh, I got something. Pinkhead asked sharply, and how is that supposed to help us? In return, Naruto gave her a slight glare. I wasn't finished yet. The blonde opened the scroll and touched a seal written on it with 3 fingers. He watched as a puff of smoke appeared as he pushed chakra through his fingers. He was holding a standard Konoha headband with a slash through the symbol, as the smoke cleared. I knew I would need this someday, so I asked Pervy Sage to seal this for me so I wouldn't lose it. Kakashi gave nod. The blonde chuckled and scratched the top of his head, saying, good, and since it has in a storage seal, then that means the scent is still there. Good job, Naruto. It was nothing. He lost track of how many Junin he had defeated in his youth because they overestimated themselves and underestimated him. Now, he said, getting back on track, you all have your orders. The Junin smiled, not that the others could see it under his mask, at his student's modesty. It was a rare trait to have and a very good one for a ninja. After all, being too cocky in battle could very well get you killed. Do you have any questions? Kakashi waited a moment to see if there were any protests. When he received none, he continued. No, the team moved in response to his command, with Summer and Sakura sprinting toward the town and Naruto and Kakashi taking to the trees. Then let's move out. With Summer and Sakura, as soon as the 2 women of Team 7 arrived in Wave, they vanished into the busy streets. squeezing through the crowds and keeping an eye out for any flashes of red, white, or orange hair, which shouldn't be too difficult because these colors are so exotic among the typical black and brown hair that Wave residents share. The girls searched until midday, asking a random citizen every now and then, and finally decided to take a brief break at a nearby cafe, where they now sat in a booth sipping slowly from their cups of tea in relative comfort, Sakura occasionally glancing at Summer. "Does my face have anything on it?" the Rose raised an amused brow in question. Sakura waved her arms in front of her in denial as her face flushed from being seen staring. No, I was just reflecting on how little I actually know about you. We are now on the same team, after all." Near the end, she finished a little awkwardly. The only times Summer really interacted with the girl were when she first got to the village and during the test, and then she had stayed with Naruto in the hospital until he woke up, and by then they had already received their mission. Given all of this, Summer came to the conclusion that the pinkette had some truth to her statements. Sakura smiled as Summer said, "I guess you're right. I guess I'll start." The introduction Naruto had used to help their team at Beacon get to know one another was the one she chose to use. The silver-eyed girl's voice darkened with emotion as she finished her list of dislikes, almost making Sakura wince. "My name is Summer Rose. I like Naruto, Yang, my friends at Beacon, and being a huntress. I dislike Grimm, people who enjoy the pain of others, and a certain somebody." Summer's tone suddenly became upbeat once more as she said, "My hobbies are working on Blizzard Rose, training, and hunting Grimm. My dreams for the future is to become an awesome mother and the greatest huntress in the world." When the pinkette heard the new term, she asked, "Blizzard Rose?" Summer smiled with delight. Summer trailed off as Sakura's eyes started to swirl in bewilderment. "That's the name of my swords. They're special blades reinforced by a powerful alternating current and resonated at extremely high frequencies. This oscillation weakened the molecular bonds of anything it cut, thereby increasing its cutting ability." She let out a sigh. "It vibrates really fast and I can cut through almost anything." She boiled it down. "Oh," Sakura said, putting a fist in her hand. "That's why it cut through Kakashi Sensei's kunai so easily." Summer gave a sheepish smile. Considering a few accidents that happened during her early training, she remarked, "Actually, that was just the regular blade. Naruto put a seal on it so I don't, accidentally cut some stuff." The news made the Haruno's eyes almost burst from her skull. The power of the blade was sealed at that moment. She would absolutely detest having the entire cutting power taken away from her. So, why'd ya name it Blizzard Rose? Summer gave her nose a little tap. "You'll find out soon enough. Now, I believe it's your turn." Sakura's expression was one of realization. "Oh, right, my name is Sakura Haruno. I like my master Tsunade, my village and my friends who live there. I dislike being weak and people who understatement me. My hobbies are learning new medical ninjutsu and training to become stronger. My dream is to become the greatest medical ninja ever and..." Her tone waned. She proclaimed resolutely, "Find an old teammate and bring him back." "Sasuke, right?" inquired Summer. "Naruto told me about his fight with him at the Valley of the End." Sakura gave a nod. "Yes, and I will make every effort to bring him back." "What if he tries to murder you? I need to know if I have the resolve," the Rose asked. I don't." After a moment of hesitation, the Haruno said, "I'm not sure what I'd do." Summer sighed and said, "Well, you have to find out because, based on what I've heard, there's a good chance that once we locate Sasuke, he'll try to kill you." She stated solemnly, "I'd prefer not to lose another teammate." At that, Sakura winced. "All right. I'll try my best to prevent that from happening," the Rose said with a grateful nod. "I only ask for that. Now," she said, "let's resume our work. We have a rogue Toa." She interrupted, her gaze shifting to dinner plates before settling into a deadpan. "What's the matter?" Sakura inquired, a little alarmed by the silver-eyed huntress's abrupt facial changes, and Summer merely gestured feebly toward the shop's large windows and said, dully. Sakura also turned and had to suppress a gasp of surprise when she saw a group of 4 people walking just outside the tea place. They were all wearing matching black coats with red clouds on them, and each of them had red, orange, and white hair, but the male leader caught Sakura's attention the most because, although his clothes and build were hidden by his cloak, his dark hair that spiked up near the back was a dead giveaway. Sakura exhaled, Sasuke. He had arrived, and she wasn't expecting to see him so quickly. They weren't even searching for him at the time, and he had shown up without warning with a group of people. Well, no use in complaining now. Summer sighed at the utterly coincidental and random discovery, suggesting that some of Naruto's luck had trickled down to her. Might as well make the most of the situation. Although she may not be the best strategist on her team, the title belonged to Ravina. She was more like Naruto and made better last-minute plans. She was confident enough to order Sakura to create a shadow clone and send it to the location where Kakashi stated he and Naruto would be, though, because she knew how to think outside of battle. Fortunately, the Haruno was still able to follow orders despite her shock, so she made the clone and sent it on its mission. When she was done, Sakura turned to the rows and couldn't help but ask what to do next. Now we follow them. Kakashi's dogs will be able to find us. When the Pinkette nodded, Summer smiled and turned to face the group disappearing into the distance, saying, "They're getting away. Once the boys catch up, we'll figure out the next step." The two had a job to do, so they left the shop and headed for the roofs. "We need to go." With Naruto and Kakashi. The bridge was named after me. Naruto fixed his gaze on the large text above him. Kakashi said, looking at his lone male pupil, "It would seem so. You really shouldn't be that surprised," he said. "You did contribute to this nation's salvation." Scratching his neck, the blonde said, "But I didn't do it alone. However, you were the one who motivated them to defend their nation." "No, you didn't." Kakashi concurred. "You became a hero in the eyes of the public because of that." "Well, I guess so." Naruto simply laughed sheepishly, and the Junin laughed with him before becoming serious. "All right." After removing a kunai and nicking the pad of his thumb, Kakashi holstered his weapon and ran through a set of hand seals before slamming his hand onto the ground. A sealing matrix spread from his hand, and a small, pug-like dog with brown fur and a dark brown snout and ears appears with a big puff of smoke. The dog was wearing a blue vest with the Hino Moheji seal on it, and a Konoha forehead protector on top of his head. "Yo," the small dog said, lifting a paw. "Kakashi, what do you need me for right now?" Holding out the headband, Kakashi replied, "I need you to track this scent, Pakun." "Oh, is that it? Are you certain you don't want to experience my paw's softness?" With an enticing lift of his front foot, he asked. In an attempt to emphasize the situation to the Ninken, the Junin said urgently, "Maybe later, but for now we really need your help now." All right. Pakun took a quick whiff of the headband and started sniffing the area. "Yep, he's definitely been here," Pakun said. The dog reported, "I can't tell you how long I'll be able to track him because of the mist, but I'll do my best. The scent lingers in the air all around here and seems to be heading town." Kakashi turned to Naruto and said, "That's all I can ask for. Let's go." Right. The two ninja, along with a dog, quickly crossed the bridge and arrived at the other side, where they climbed onto the roofs and followed Pakun as he steadily followed Sasuke's scent until they encountered Sakura's clone a few minutes later. Literally. A pink blur appeared in front of Naruto as he leapt to the next roof, causing him to crash into it. The blonde instinctively grabbed onto the blur, twisted it in midair, and threw it at the wall. Sakura, whom Naruto had finally identified as the blur, spun around for a moment before catching herself and landing feet first against the wall, where she automatically grabbed hold of it with her chakra, and Naruto quickly followed suit, adhering to the opposite wall. "Oh, Sakura!" Naruto cried out, feeling alarmed at his actions. "I'm sorry." Sakura scowled at him. "Anyway, Naruto. The next time, just be more cautious," she said sharply. "I might have been dispelled if I hadn't caught myself in time." Naruto nodded, but he did notice something strange about her statement. "Dispelled?" Sakura nodded when he asked. "I am a clone, yes. Even though I don't have as many ridiculous reserves as you do, I still have enough to create one clone without running out of chakras. In any case, this is not the moment. I need to share some information with Sensei. He's where?" "Up here." Sakura jumped from her spot on the wall, Naruto right behind her, and looked up to see the aforementioned Junin standing at the edge of the roof with a hand raised. "Kakashi. Sensei," the clone said, "we located Sasuke." "Explain." Summer noticed the group through the window while she and I were taking a quick break at a tea shop. Kakashi nodded. "She told the boss to make me and sent me to find you guys while they follow them," she said. "Wonderful choice. I want you to stay out of sight while you continue to follow Sasuke and the others. He gave the order. We'll catch up as soon as possible." "Got it." Kakashi then turned to Pakun as the clone vanished, returning the memories to the original. "All right, new directives. I want you to follow Sakura's clone scent back to the tea shop. Then we'll catch up to them from there." The Ninken nodded and sniffed the air, identifying the right scent and changing course from the original path, pursuing the scent right away before it faded. The other two fell in behind him as they jumped from roof to roof once more. "Be careful, Summer," said Naruto, a little alarmed. Sasuke Uchiha felt irate. "Know the word, angry." was too small. He was absolutely furious. He had believed that killing his brother would satisfy him and allow him to finally exact revenge on his clan. However, he now understood the reality of what had transpired all those years prior. The man in the mask, claiming to be the notorious Madara Uchiha, explained to him how the Sharingan's power over the beast led Konoha's leadership to believe that the Uchiha were responsible for the attack following the nine-tailed demon fox's attack. He was informed that the Uchiha were under constant observation after that, which Madara says was achieved by concentrating all of them in one area of the village. The Uchiha developed a sense of animosity toward the Senju-influenced government as a result of their mistrust and seclusion from the rest of the village. In order to topple Konoha's government, the Uchiha, under the leadership of his father, Fugaku Uchiha, started organizing a coup d'état. The Uchiha began inserting members into Konoha's command structure to serve as spies in anticipation of the coup. Itachi Uchiha, his brother, was assigned to the Anbu, the Hokage's direct arm, but Itachi disagreed with the Uchiha's plans because he thought the coup would only lead to another shinobi world war. He became a double agent as a result, informing Konoha about the Uchiha's schemes. The third Hokage attempted to reach a peaceful agreement with the clan because he disagreed with how the Uchiha were treated after the Fox's attack. However, Danzo Shimura thought that removing all of the Uchiha would result in the least amount of bloodshed and that negotiations would not resolve any issues. Shisui Uchiha was given the responsibility of watching over his brother after the Uchiha became aware of his peculiar behavior. Itachi was opposed to the coup, as was Shisui, a close friend. Shisui tried to use Koto Amatsukami from his Mangekyo Sharingan to pressure the Uchiha's leaders to reconsider when peace negotiations began to falter. Before Shisui could use his right eye, Danzo took it for himself, believing that this was a waste of Koto Amatsukami's infrequent use. After failing and worrying that Danzo would also take his other eye, Shisui gave his brother his left eye before ending his own life. The Uchiha lost faith in Itachi after discovering his body because they thought he had actually killed Shisui and staged the suicide. Shisui's death made Itachi realize that things could not be stopped, even though he still hoped to find a peaceful solution. He started to openly criticize the clan's behavior and show animosity toward certain members. Aware of Itachi's mixed emotions, Danzo described the two possible outcomes. Either the Uchiha could be permitted to execute their coup, which would ultimately result in the extinction of the entire clan, including him and Itachi. Or Itachi could kill the Uchiha prior to the coup and be granted permission to spare Sasuke's life in exchange. While remaining devoted to the village, Itachi made the decision to become a rogue nin and save the life of his younger brother. Sasuke vowed to exact revenge on his brother after hearing Madara's account of what had actually transpired. He would begin by destroying the Hidden Leaf, specifically Danzo and his supporters. But he was not conceited enough to think he could conquer all of Konoha by himself. For this reason, he accepted Madara's invitation to join the Akatsuki and the recently renamed Hawk Team. He might have enough manpower with their assistance to completely eradicate that pitiful excuse for a village from the face of the planet. He had to first meet with the person the Akatsuki had sent to arrange a meeting, though. In order to locate him, he is currently traveling through Nami no Kuni. He would meet with the informant to find out what he needed to do to become a full member of their ranks, he was informed. Sasuke knew that this might be his only opportunity to be inducted, so he made every effort to succeed. He even tolerated the incessant arguments between Suigetsu and Karen as well as Redhead's pathetic attempts to woo him. The only reason he kept the girl around was because of her amazing senses. He had no interest in her. The same is true for Suigetsu and Jugo. He could use them as pawns and then discard them when he was done using them. But he was stuck with them for the time being. His inner monologue was interrupted by a voice calling, "Sasuke." He looked at the redhead who had woken him up. "What?" he demanded in a tone that suggested annoyance. Taking note of this, Karen spoke rapidly. "I can sense two people following us along with two other signatures rapidly gaining on them," she said. Sasuke paused to consider this. "How close are they?" "There are two on the roofs to our left. The other two are 3 kilometers behind them." "What are their chakra levels?" Sasuke acknowledged this, but gestured for the girl to go on. "2 are around the average Junins while 1 I can't get a good read on. It's almost like they don't have chakra, but a different source of energy altogether." Karen's eyes widened and she trailed off. "Right, well, the final one is. Dear Kami, his chakra is larger than that fish guy's, Kisame." The Uchiha's eyes widened as well. There had never been a person with more reserves than the renowned, tailless Biju. Karen staggered abruptly, and Jugo reached out to catch her fall. The giant with the orange hair worriedly said, "Karen, are you alright?" Slowly, Karen nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just that guy's chakra. When I tried digging deeper, I was nearly overwhelmed by the amount of rage and hatred I felt. It was like I was staring into the face of the devil. She exhaled. Before he controlled his emotions and gave the matter some thought, Sasuke started to feel a little anxious. His quick thinking immediately identified at least one of the individuals pursuing them. Whoever is tracking us has a Jinchuriki with them. Karen, can you look to see the state of his chakra? He inquired. Karen closed her eyes and gave a somewhat hesitant nod. She said, it feels erratic, but controlled. Sasuke gave a nod. That means the Jinchuriki has a large amount or full control over his tailed beast. If he is after one of us, then we have to lead them to a place with a lot of cover so we can fight on even ground. He started to plan. I know a place just east of here that we could go to. It's an abandoned log factory that went out of business when Gato still ruled. I don't think it has been fixed up since then. Suigetsu offered. Sasuke gave a nod. The Uchiha concluded, all right, then that's where we'll lure them. His eyes briefly flashed red, revealing 3 intersecting ellipses before fading back to black. Karen, I want you to walk in the center so you can keep me updated on their whereabouts. Jugo, Suigetsu, you two stay behind and watch her back. I'll take point. Now let's go. Sakura observed, they're changing directions. Summer gave a nod. It appears that they may be approaching their destination, even though they had been traveling along the same path for almost the whole time. As the group they had been following rounded another corner, the Rose urged, come on. We can't lose sight of them. The other two will be here soon. Right. The 2 women kept their distance from Sasuke and followed him. Curiously, they observed as the group made seemingly arbitrary detours and a few backtracks before arriving at an ancient, sizable, roofless building with multiple logs positioned in dangerous ways. The only signs of life in the surrounding area were the occasional large rock and tree. The 2 girls were immediately alerted by this and took cover among the closest branches. Without thinking, Summer asked, think this is a trap? Sakura looked at her blankly. Yeah, that's what I figured. She concluded, holding her arm and glancing sideways as she started to laugh uncomfortably. The Haruno rolled her eyes and said, huh. However, the girl's actions caused a tiny smile to tug at the corners of her mouth, which she was unable to control. Let's wait on Naruto and Kakashi. Sensei, before we go any further, she offered. Summer started to agree, but a different voice cut her off. Sakura gasped, no need to wait. We're already here. Summer almost squealed and collapsed in shock, but for the hand covering her mouth and the arm around her waist. Silver eyes met blue ones that gleamed with laughter. Easy there, Summer. It's just us. Before she spun out of the Uzumaki's embrace and pointed an accusing finger at him. Summer shivered slightly as his breath tickled her ear. No need to panic. Naruto arched an eyebrow and said, I wasn't panicking, I just, stepped on a tack. He noted, you're wearing boots. He laughed as Summer pouted while glancing down at the aforementioned shoes. It was a large tack. The Rose, if she could, pouted even more when she said, we're in a tree. Aside from what your clone has already told us, you both need to update Naruto and I on the situation, Kakashi said, grabbing Summer's attention, as amusing as this is. All right, Sakura said, nodding, we started pursuing Sasuke and his cronies after I sent the clone. They didn't appear to have a clear destination in mind at first, but that quickly changed when the redhead paused and spoke to Sasuke while looking in our direction. They led us here after they carried on walking. The redhead appears to be some sort of censor, the Junin observed, with a grimace from Kakashi, which means we no longer have the element of surprise. Naruto slammed his fists together and said, if they know we're here already, let's make sure they feel it too. I say we just go in there and beat the crap out of them. Sakura rounded on the man after Kakashi shook his head at the blonde's behavior and said, leave it to Naruto to think of the most simplest of ideas. He lifted his headband and said, while not the most sophisticated of plans, it's really the only option we have. You mean that this dim-witted plan will actually be carried out? Summer smiled as she pulled out her swords and asked in shock. Uncomplicated and direct. I enjoy it, you as well. Ignoring Sakura's protests, Naruto smirked as his gauntlets shifted and said, let's do this. The blonde jumped from the tree, landed in front of the entrance, and sprinted inside after firing a few shots at the door, blowing it in. Before turning to face the others, Summer remarked absently, he always was one for flashy entrances. I guess we better get going. Can't let him start without us, she said, leaping to her feet and sprinting after Naruto, with Kakashi trailing closely behind. I'm surrounded by idiots, Sakura sighed, palming her face. Well, you know what they say, if you can't beat them, join them, she shrugged. Hey, I know you're in here, Sasuke, yelled Naruto. Get out, A familiar, enormous sword impaled the ground where he had been standing, and the blonde, sensing movement to his right, ducked as a few shuriken whizzed overhead before diving sideways. As his opponent turned to water, Naruto rolled to his feet, sprang at him, and delivered a punch that went straight through him, blinking owlishly, just in time to avoid a huge, chakra-powered fist that exploded the ground beneath him and kicked up dust at the same time. Naruto shielded his eyes from the tiny particles and heard the hazy cries of fire style, fireball jutsu. The Uzumaki blinked out any last bits of dust and looked up just in time to see a huge fireball rushing in his direction, but before it could reach him, a flash of red appeared and the flames were split in two. With her swords ready, Summer grinned at Naruto and said, "Need assistance?" He waved her away, saying, "I had them on the ropes," peeved, as if. "Sure you did." "Yes, I did, I think you're real." "Now you're mocking me, whatever you say. Now you're just being mean." A quiet voice interrupted them, saying, "Please stop talking." Jugo, the giant with the orange hair, got to his feet, but he appeared slightly different than before. His sclera turned black, his irises turned pale yellow, and his skin turned dark on the left side of his body. He said in an unhinged voice, "I don't like your voices. I find them annoying. I'll probably just tear your throats out." He let out a wild laugh. As annoying as it is, Jugo stopped laughing and looked up just in time to see a foot crash into his face and send him flying. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that. It would be better for me if he could still speak." "Hi, Kakashi. Took a long time. Where is Sakura?" Choosing to disregard the Junin's jab, Naruto asked. The girl in question slid beside him and said, "I can't let you do this on your own. I'm here." She concluded by making him clutch his chest in a phony sense of pain. "You never know what you'll mess up." "Oh, Sakura, you broke my poor heart." He leaned against Summer and said, "I don't know how much more I can take. Quick, kiss me to make the pain go away." The Rose laughed and shoved the blonde away, but not before giving him a quick peck on the cheek. But then a voice tinged with malice cut through the moment. Team 7 looked up at the rafters and saw their target standing above them. "I should have known they would have sent you guys to find me." He turned to face Summer, who shrugged and remained silent. "Though I do not recognize you." The crimson cloud pattern on his cloak caught Naruto's attention right away. "You joined the Akatsuki?" Sasuke gave him a quick look. He said stoically, "That is none of your concern. I think you're all here to try to get me back." "Obviously, I am going to kick your ass and take you back by force," the blonde said, hammering his fist into a palm. "Weren't we told to start by negotiating?" Sakura was compelled to inquire. "Yes, but negotiations went right out the window when they attacked us," replied Kakashi. "You intend to defeat me? The Uchiha drew lead. You'll be the one who gets kicked if it's like the last time." In addition, he disappeared and reappeared behind Naruto brandishing his sword, saying, "I will not let you live like last time." His eyes widened in shock for a moment before he turned to bring up a guard just as a yellow-clad fist smashed into it. But that didn't seem to be the end of it, as the fist then exploded and sent him crashing into some machinery. Sasuke swung his Chikudo and watched as it phased through the blonde as if he weren't there. He glared at the smirking blonde as he picked himself up from the debris. With both fists raised in a brawler's stance, Naruto declared, "I'm a hell of a lot stronger this time around, Sasuke. I'm not the same as I was last time. Looks like I can't hold back this time," he thought. "I will finish what I started all those years ago." Sasuke's glare intensified tenfold at the blonde's words, and he felt the familiar shift in his eyes as they bled red and 3 tomos appeared. He said out loud, "I will end you, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto's smile turned savage. "Bring it." The blonde may be on a mission to bring him back, but Naruto was thrilled to finally get his rematch with the Uchiha, and once he defeats him, he can finally say that he fulfilled his promise to his female teammate. Well, that and his desire to repay him for pushing 2 Chidoris through his chest are the only reasons he really still cares about Sasuke. He no longer had the time to try to mend a bond that the other person themselves had cut, so if he wanted to be alone, that's fine. "Or are you too afraid?" he mocked. "Come on, ya bastard." "Well, as if," sneered Sasuke. "Jugo," he commanded his group, "I want you to pursue the person wearing the mask. Suigetsu, you get the 2 girls, Karen. Which I don't care about. I am the loser." "Ho, I didn't know you felt that way about me, Sasuke." The brunette laughed. "I'm flattered, but, sorry, I'm taken." The swordsman simply shrugged him off, saying only, "It was funny." Suigetsu snorted in amusement in the background, causing the Uchiha to give him a nasty glare. "Hey, see, even your team believes so," Naruto chuckled. "Are we going to begin or not?" When the Uzumaki kept laughing carelessly, Sasuke became agitated and said, "I was expecting to fight, not be in a comedy routine." "That's where you're wrong, ya bastard," Naruto said, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye after concluding his burst of laughter. "The battle has already started." As soon as he finished speaking, Summer materialized behind Suigetsu, swinging one of her swords in an upward arc, and the man with the sharp teeth remained emotionless in the face of the unexpected assault, letting the blade pierce his water-like body. He was able to quickly recover and solidify his body before it could freeze completely, but his calm expression soon changed as the area where he was cut froze and started to spread across his body. He soon regretted shifting his focus away from the rose when she brought her other sword around and sliced into his now solid chest, and he was barely able to yank his own sword around and block the next strike due to the pain. It was Summer's turn to be shocked when Suigetsu's blade repelled Blizzard Rose's cutting power, but the blow was still powerful enough to send the confused man flying into the back wall, where he was immediately buried beneath a mountain of debris. Before Summer could think any longer about the size of the big sword, she heard birds chirping wildly. Thanks to Naruto's detailed stories, the rose recognized the sound instantly and spun sharply to the side, avoiding a fist covered in lightning with a wry smile as she watched the attack. "You know," she said, "that move is really loud for an assassination technique." "I told you so." The Uchiha almost suffered a heart attack at the unexpected proximity and was too stunned to react when the fist struck his face, causing his feet to lift off the ground for the second time today, when Naruto spoke from behind Sasuke. The moment of weightlessness was abruptly interrupted when Sasuke's leg was seized, and Naruto grasped the man's leg while spinning quickly, dark eyes meeting blue as he was drawn back towards the blonde. "The Summer, ice guillotine," he called, his voice a little distorted from spinning. As soon as he finished speaking, Summer was in the air, upside down, her feet pressed against a rafter. Naruto letting go of Sasuke and she pushed off the rafter, spinning like a top at the flying Uchiha with ice coating her blades. Sasuke grimaced at the approaching technique, thinking angrily, "Damn it, I have no time." 3 quickly spinning ellipses took the place of the tomos on his Sharingan. "Susa. Hee." As Jugo appeared between the two with a fist shaped like an axe and tried to stop the deadly top, Sasuke was interrupted. They clashed against each other, the Orangette laughing crazily the entire time, and there was a loud screeching sound like metal grinding against itself. When both attacks exploded and the shockwave sent both participants flying backwards, the battle was over. Jugo just struck the far wall, blowing a hole through it, while Naruto effortlessly blurred behind the flying rose and caught her. "The hell is with their teamwork?" Sasuke moaned hotly from his prone position on the floor, but he would not receive a response as he was drawn to a sudden roar. Sasuke mentally cursed as he flipped onto his feet and used a quick replacement with a piece of debris before slipping into the shadows to give himself a brief moment to catch his breath and consider his next course of action. The Uchiha turned to see a large dragon made entirely of flames barreling towards him. "It seems I'll have to stall until they can return," he thought to himself. "I can't let them start doing those team attacks again. Damn it. I've miscalculated Naruto's improvement over the years. And that girl." He gritted his teeth in frustration, already realizing that Karen had finished digging Suigetsu out and was now working on healing him using a modified mystic palm technique. Jugo, he knew would be fine because of his high vitality. Shanaru. Thanks to the warning shout, Sasuke was able to quickly avoid the blow and saw the area he had been standing on collapse under the girl's fist. Sakura. It is not appropriate to shout when launching a sneak attack. The pinkette gave Naruto a sheepish look as he complained. "And this girl's ice release is beginning to annoy me. I thought that Hunter Nin and those people in the Land of Snow were the only ones with that ability." Sasuke's Sharingan detected movement to the side, and he had to jump back to avoid a crescent arc of ice. He then started to dodge a series of blows from Kakashi, saying, "Damn. I can't take all of them at once. I'll have to use it." The Uchiha used this opportunity to sweep Kakashi's feet out from under him before turning again to kick the man away after Sasuke, rather than dodging, pushed a left hook from the silver-haired Junin to the side, causing him to overextend himself. Sasuke's Sharingan instantly changed again, a purple chakra enveloping his body as a skeletal, armored creature encased him. "Susanoo." The Uchiha proudly declared, "My Mangekyo Sharingan has given me this ability. You won't be able to touch me anymore." While Sakura and Kakashi gaped at the spectral warrior in horror and amazement, Summer clenched her teeth and gripped Blizzard Rose more tightly, while Naruto simply appeared thoughtful. The others absorbed this information with differing degrees of shock. "Whatever you said you had to kill me for back in the valley, isn't that the Mangek?" he asked. Naruto wasn't sure if Sasuke was shocked by the question or by his lack of response. He chose to respond simply, "Yes." The Uzumaki nodded and put a hand to his chin. Interesting. Now everything makes sense. He gave the Uchiha a dramatic finger point and a forceful shake of his head. You're in love with that orange-haired guy. What? Everyone wore a comical expression of shock, and the others all yelled as one of them caused Naruto to fall over, clutching his stomach in laughter. Why? You're F. Faces, between bursts of laughter, he let out a gasp. Loser, what the fuck? Uncharacteristically, Sasuke yelled. That was totally out of context and didn't make any sense. The Uzumaki gave him a phony thumbs up and said, B. Because, which caused Team 7 to all palm their faces simultaneously as Sasuke became enraged. I thought your reaction would be hilarious, he said after his laughter subsided. Sakura remarked wearily, I really shouldn't be all that surprised. It's just like him to pull something like this. That idiot. He nodded. That is, after all, what granted him the title of Konoha's #1 hyperactive knucklehead. Well, odd. Summer observed that Goodwitch had given him the same title at Beacon. The silver-haired man sighed. I guess some things never change. Naruto abruptly added, I also did it to confirm something. You can come out now, fish. Breath. The others were perplexed until a loud laugh echoed through the building. Very good, brat. A big man emerged from the shadows surrounding the rear entrance. He looked like a shark, with small, round, white eyes, gill-like facial markings under his eyes, and sharp triangular teeth, just like most of the other 7 swordsmen of the Mist members. His blue hair was fashioned like a shark fin, and a scratched mist headband adorned his forehead. But what really caught the eye was his black cloak with a crimson cloud design and a big, bandage-wrapped sword. Kisame Hoshigaki was the man. Curious, the big man said, I wonder how you noticed me though. Naruto freely acknowledged, it was mostly luck. I was staring at you when Kakashi-sensei used that fire jutsu, and the light from the jutsu bounced off your headband. It was that joke a minute ago that convinced you. Kisame and the other fighters gaped at the blonde's explanation before the swordsman let out a loud guffaw. I saw the movement you made when you tried to contain your laughter. Still laughing, he sighed regretfully and said, Ah, man. It's been a while since I laughed like that. It's too bad I have to capture you so we can rip out that biju in your stomach. Who's to say I still have it? Smirked Naruto. Kisame snorted. You're right, child. No matter how tough you are, I don't care. You're done if a biju is taken away from you. I still don't understand how the hell that man is able to live among the living, with the exception of that Gaara guy. We're going to fight or what? The blonde shrugged apathetically, whatever you say. Smirking, the man with the blue hair said, Fight? He chuckled as he shook his head slowly. Nah, kid. There will be a massacre. I'm on my home turf, he said, weaving hand signs with his hand moving at almost untraceable speeds. He then yelled out his technique, water style. Exploding water shockwave. Water poured from the Rouge Nin's mouth, causing the surrounding area to explode and flood. Eventually, the factory could no longer hold the liquid and collapsed, scattering wood and other debris all over the place. When it had all calmed down, they looked at the miniature lake that had formed, with so much water that the ninja had to water. Walk and Summer had to freeze the water beneath her to stay afloat. Well, Naruto said with a grimace, this is terrible. I wonder how they're doing. 3 adults and a child were seated in the Hokage Tower office in Konoha. It had been the group's blonde female who had spoken. Jiraiya waved her away, still cradling the toddler in his lap, saying, I'm sure they are fine, Tsunade. They are all strong in their own right, and with all of them working together I'm sure that there isn't much that can stop them. I don't think it was their abilities that Lady Tsunade was worrying about, Lord Jiraiya. Shizune replied. Tsunade gave her apprentice's words a nod. That's right. I don't care how strong Naruto and the others are. There are dangerous people after him and every single one of them are S-ranked. I think that warrants a little bit of worry. Jiraiya looked at the blonde Hokage pleadingly, but the Toad Sage shrugged and said, Nah, they'll be fine. Besides, if things go south, Naruto and Summer both have a few aces up their sleeves. And don't you have a few things to do as well? With a groan, Tsunade dragged a weary hand down her face. The white-haired man laughed and said, Don't remind me. I'd rather do more paperwork than have a meeting with those old farts in the council. I understand, but it's something you have to do if you want to help Naruto in the future. He replied. Think of it this way. If you do this, then Naruto will be one step closer to becoming Hokage and you'll be one step closer to getting away from paperwork and meetings. The Slug Princess sighed and said, I know, I'll do it, but I will not enjoy it. Shizune, can you go fetch the esteemed elders? She made sure to emphasize the word, esteemed. The dark-haired girl left the room, leaving the two Sanin alone, saying, right away, milady. After giving Yang her stuffed fox, Jiraiya asked, so, what are you going to tell them? Tsunade shrugged and said, just the basics. They don't need to know much more than that. Naruto will be happy to know that he can finally live without the constant hate being aimed at him. I thought he was over that already. He is, Jiraiya concurred, but he doesn't feel comfortable leaving his family in such a hostile environment. That's why I agreed to help look after her. Jiraiya was referring to Yang. Tsunade nodded and said, that does make a lot of sense. You do know that this isn't going to get rid of all the animosity the villagers feel, right? She inquired. Of course. He replied, but it'll be a great start, and with all the stuff he did before he left with me, he's already on the good side of the marketing district. Well, with all the trading contracts he brought in from Wave, the land of tea, the rice country, and many others, it really shouldn't be that surprising. Tsunade nodded. But what about Iwa, or even Kumo? They could stage kidnappings and assassination attempts to get to him. After all, Naruto's father isn't very liked amongst them because of his actions during the last Shinobi War, the brunette replied. Tsunade started to say something, but she stopped when the door opened and Shizune entered, followed by two elderly people. I know. Jiraiya sighed. But this is something he said he wants to happen. All we can really do is support him the best we can. One of them was a man with glasses, a beard, gray hair, and a frown that seemed to be on his face all the time. When he assumed the role of third Hokage, he dressed similarly to Hiruzen. The female elder's gray hair was tied back in a twin bun and secured with a traditional Japanese hairpin that had tassels and pearls hanging from the ends. Her eyes were so squinted that they could not be seen clearly, and she was wearing a jacket with a sash over it and a simple long kimono that was closed with an obi. They're Kaharu Utatane and Homura Midokado. With an aged voice, Homura questioned, why have you called us here, slug princess? Tsunade waved him away, saying, if it's to deal with another one of your debts then I am leaving. The elder stewed as she said dismissively, yeah, whatever. I didn't ask you here for that. I'm here to discuss the inheritance of one of our shinobi. Kaharu inquired, and who might this person be? I wasn't aware we had any more ninjas with clan relevance. As the two elders grew more focused, Tsunade remarked with a concealed smirk, yes, well, this one was well hidden. He comes from a very important clan that is now on the brink of extinction due to it being wiped out during the Second Shinobi War. The gray-haired man yelled, get on with it will you, as the slug Sanin allowed the silence to linger. The elders nodded as Tsunade stated, well, as I'm sure you are aware. The combined efforts of Iwa and Kumo during the war wiped out the Uzumaki. Throughout the years, the Uzumaki and Senju kept close ties with members sometimes marrying between clans, such as our first Hokage, Hashirama Senju and Mido Uzumaki. After the end of the Warring States period, the Senju chose to symbolize their clan's friendship by adding the Uzumaki's emblem to our flak jackets. The Uzumaki remained as close allies over many decades with them providing us sealing techniques, along with many other things, whenever there was a need. This relationship was further deepened when they sent us one of our finest Junin, Kushina Uzumaki, when she was a child before they perished in battle. When Kaharu became irritated with the subject, she demanded, we already know this. Why are you telling us this information? She was aware of the well-known red-hot-blooded habanero, but since she was already deceased, she did not see how it related to the subject. Because, Tsunade added nonchalantly, during her time here, Kushina Uzumaki was eventually rescued from an attempted kidnapping from Kumo by Minato Namikaze and later developed an intimate relationship with the Junin that resulted in pregnancy. She eventually gave birth to a child, but died shortly after during the Kyuubi attack. Minato, seeing that there was no choice, decided to seal the beast within his own son. The blonde smiled at the stunned faces of the elders. That's right. One of the final known members of the Uzumaki clan and the child of our late Hokage is none other than Naruto Uzumaki. The two surviving members of Konoha's council were in a state of open-mouthed shock when she spoke, and they were met with stunned silence. But then a fluffy orange object struck them both, ruining that moment. Together, the two turned to see Yang, who was clapping her hands with excitement and giggling joyfully. I hit old Pusen. Jiraiya laughed sheepishly, still clinging to the little girl. It seems she is going to like formal settings just as much as her father. Homura inquired, and just who is her father? Why Naruto Uzumaki of course. Jiraiya replied with a smile. The older female could not handle that and passed out in shock, requiring the other male to grab her. The man dragged Kaharu along with him as he left the room after giving them all one last glance. A little amused, Shizune remarked, I think you overwhelmed them a bit, Jiraiya. Sama. He laughed sheepishly again. Just a bit. After Yang finally tired out, the three fell into a cozy silence while he slept soundly. The little paper bird perched on the windowsill, watching them closely, went unnoticed. In the interim, a woman with short, straight blue hair and a large, light blue paper flower in it was sitting outside the Hokage monuments. She had a labrae-piercing and amber eyes with lavender eyeshadow. But what set this enigmatic woman apart was her black cloak with red clouds, which represented her loyalty to the Akatsuki. As it delivered the final piece of information, her eyes looked blankly at a tiny paper bird. Final known members of the Uzumaki clan and the child of our late Hokage is none other than Naruto Uzumaki, it read. After releasing this information to other villages, the woman sighed thoughtfully and thought, this could be useful. If we were to capture the child, then we could stage it so that it looked like Iwa was responsible. Her body gradually turned to paper and drifted away in the wind, saying, I must report this to Lord Pain. While this was going on, a crow of average size sat in the shadow of a tree branch, its red eyes shining a little. After that, it cawed and flew away, leaving behind only one black feather. Summer cried out, that hurts, as another water shark swept her away. Team 7 had been struggling to defeat Kisami's swarm of carnivorous fish and Sasuke's Susanoo ever since Kisame had joined the fight. When Jugo and the partially recovered Suigetsu returned to the fight, it got worse. When the rose's body struck something warm while in the air, her thoughts came to a stop. Her ears were ringing, and Naruto's worried voice asked, Are you alright, Summer? As she climbed out of his arms, she gave a little grunt. She attempted to reassure him, saying, Yeah, I'm fine. However, his anxious expression persisted, so it didn't seem to work. She repeated, Seriously, I'm alright. But this is getting ridiculous. None of my ice-based attacks are working on him. He just shrugs it off and turns them all into liquid. Naruto grimaced, I know. He looked at the bandaged weapon and said, His sword is also giving me a bad vibe. I swear I heard it growl at me once. Summer observed as Sasuke hurled a wall of fire through the Susanoo, which Kakashi quickly avoided. Hey, no kidding. She complained that, these techniques are just unfair. With a negative shake of her head, the rose said, I could still use it, you know? No, we still don't know the full effects that has on you. She responded. Remember what happened with Kakashi? Grumbled, yeah, but I had activated it when I was upset and let it take over, which was incredibly stupid of me. We already know that it amplifies any emotion I felt right before I use it. I don't have any negative feelings right now, so I'll be perfectly fine. But, Summer, Naruto's raised voice in her ear made her wince, but she relaxed when she saw his beaming face. I'll be fine. Besides, it's a gift from that white-haired bitch, I should at least make the most of it. After another moment of hesitation, she let out a defeated sigh. Naruto bent over and briefly kissed Summer, saying, Okay. Just be careful. I don't want to have to stop you again. He smiled as he withdrew, and the rose blushed slightly. No problem. Now, let's see if I can break that impenetrable armor. With the same appearance as before, the violet, nearly black mark emerged. His left eye turned the same color as the mark, and his smile turned feral. He squatted and leaned forward, his legs stiffening. He then suddenly blasted forward, causing a huge wave of water to rise above the others and almost drench Summer, who had stopped this by flinging up a big shield of ice. As Naruto practically flew across the surface of the miniature lake and collided with Sasuke, his form left a deep gash in the water. Dark energy condensed on his gauntlet's spikes, causing them to extend, and he cocked his arm back. When he arrived at his target, he struck the ghostly fighter with his fist. The water below the two blew away, revealing the damp ground below, and the resulting sound was similar to a cannon firing. Huntress had to cling to something to keep herself from being blown away by the force of the blow, which nearly destroyed the nearby ninja. When his Susanoo bent inward from the fist, Sasuke, who had taken the full force of the blow, felt his eyes widen in surprise. He lowered his shield arm in a panic, trying to strike the blonde. When Naruto saw the approaching shield, he aimed his free arm sideways and fired a shot, allowing the recoil to push him aside. After successfully avoiding the attack, the Uzumaki allowed himself to drop back to the ground. As soon as his feet made contact with the muddy ground, he leapt back up, creating an indentation that was 3 feet deep. As Naruto reached the peak of his leap, he started spinning quickly and using his gauntlets to accelerate his descent. As a result, the blonde appeared to be a wildly spinning meteor as he descended toward the Uchiha and kicked the violet Susanoo in the head, causing him to look devastating. Before the water could bury the Uchiha, Naruto's foot touched it, and the cannon sound instantly returned as a visible shockwave exploded from the point of contact. sending Sasuke crashing into the still, exposed earth. With a slow exhale, Naruto landed back on the water. That should slow him down, but it might not have been enough to defeat him, he reflected. He jumped back just in time to see a purple arrow fly up past him and into the sky, where it finally detonated, blowing away a few clouds, as the water below him started to surge upward. The first arrow was followed by several more, forcing him to perform a strange dance to avoid being struck by the lethal projectiles. Never mind, he deadpanned. Just as another arrow exploded from the water, he lost his footing and started to fall backwards. Oh, crap. He was engulfed in a tremendous explosion as the rocket-like shaft struck his back. Summer, who had been observing the short but impactful battle, concluded it was time to leave since she knew Naruto would be alright. She leapt from where she was on the water and started skating on a trail of ice that was continuously accumulating at her feet. Kisame raised his sword in reaction to the rose's movement. The ensuing collision sent gusts of wind flying from the contact and threw up the surrounding water. Summer's blade slid to the side as he smirked and flicked his sword, saying, "K, you're a quick one, When the silver-eyed huntress spun to the side and hurled an arc of ice at the man, she grunted in response, "But you lack the power for finishing blows." In response, Kisame swung his hand and broke it like glass. As he holstered his sword and made a few hand gestures, he remarked, "That ice release of yours is interesting as well." A half-dozen small sharks were launched at her at terminal velocity, with the statement, "It doesn't seem to require any seals or chakra that Samahata can devour." She lunged at him once more as she swayed from side to side, allowing the aquatic creatures to fly past her. She threw a series of angry blows at him, which he either batted aside or simply avoided, making the rose more and more irritated. He stopped dodging, pulled Samahata back out, and swung towards her midsection. "You have a nice technique as well," Kisame said reluctantly, "but it feels a bit sloppy." He skidded backwards as Summer leapt clear over the blade and delivered a hard spin kick to his face. The blue-skinned man raised an eyebrow as he dabbed at the tiny bit of blood on his lips. "Yeah, my style is still a bit rough," Summer said with ease, "but that's because it's not mine I'm using." He posed the question rhetorically, "Is that so? Then how do you fight, huh? Do you even use a sword?" "No, not really." The girl's sheepish laugh caught Kisame off guard. "This is actually a design I got recently before coming here, so I don't have much experience with them, but I'm getting better," she smiled as she finished. Inquiringly, he asked, "Then what do you usually fight with?" As she directed aura into her hands, Summer smiled. She slammed the bottoms of the hilts together as the seals engraved on the pommel of her swords glowed brightly. There was the sound of several locking mechanisms snapping together and several gears shifting. Subsequently, the two swords abruptly separated, exposing a lengthy metallic shaft that held them together. Before settling into a new position, the rose expertly twirled the long two-headed spear around the back of her hand. With one hand moving to the front end of the shaft and the other remaining at the other end, she bent her back leg and slid her left foot forward. Summer said, "This is my weapon of choice." After being taken aback by the first change, Kisame smiled excitedly at the girl. "This'll be fun." Sakura screamed, "This is so not fun," as she ducked under another blow from the enormous sword. A few bruises adorned her bare skin, and her clothing was strewn with rips and tears from multiple near misses. Suigetsu smiled and said, "What are you talking about? I'm having a great time." He swung the enormous blade in an overhead arc, making the pinkhead jump to the side to avoid being cut in half. As soon as she had done this, though, a boosted fist struck her, catching her off guard and sending her flying. When the white-haired swordsman appeared in front of her with a side slash, Sakura instantly threw herself backwards after flipping in the air, landing neatly, and skidding back a few feet. When Suigetsu realized he had missed, he turned the handle around and took another swing. But because she acted so quickly, Sakura was unable to avoid the next blow and was forced to watch as the blade approached. Abruptly, a chakra-enhanced kunai caught the sword. "Sorry it took me so long." Kakashi smiled sardonically, his eyes wide. Sakura looked to the side where a redhead lay unconscious on top of a rock and said, "I had to take care of that before I interfered because I noticed that they kept getting themselves healed." She leapt back to her feet and said, "Thanks for the save, sensei. I wouldn't have been able to dodge that last move if you hadn't been here on time." The Silvered dismissed the gratitude, saying, "No problem." He looked back at Suigetsu's strained face. He let go of the kunai and allowed the swordsman to fall forward before he gave a side kick that knocked away an attacking jugo. "Now, I believe it would be fair if I were to even the numbers a bit, he said. Kakashi spun on a dime and then pushed Suigetsu under the water with a big splash after dropping a heel on his back. An error. The purple-eyed man whirled around as soon as he was in the water, shooting multiple enormous water bullets out of his fingers. In order to avoid the lethal bullets, Kakashi's Sharingan eye moved in accordance with the chakra flares it detected. However, he was unable to avoid the unexpected surge of water beneath his feet and was launched into the air, where Jugo was waiting. A huge transformed axe hand was pushed away by the Junin as soon as he recovered. Before hurling him down towards Sakura, who was waiting with her arm cocked back, his hands sprang out and grabbed the man's now overextended arm. When Jugo got to her, the Pinkette unleashed a strong straight right that struck the man's face with a gunshot. Like sound, sending Jugo flying across the water like a rock with his face half crushed in. His body continued to move until it struck a tree, which fell on top of him when it made contact. Suigetsu started to perspire uncomfortably at the girl's incredible strength and froze at the unexpected loss of his teammate. He missed Kakashi running through a chain of hand seals entirely as he gazed at the Pinkette, but the Junin yelled. Without questioning his command, the girl jumped to the top of the closest tree and watched as her sensei emerged behind Suigetsu, his arms encircling the swordsman's midsection. "Get off of the water, Sakura," she exclaimed. With his hands in the last seal before him, the Silverette exclaimed, lightning style, electric needle spark. Electricity leapt from Kakashi's body to his own, knocking him out before Suigetsu could do anything about it. When the Junin realized this was not a clone, he relaxed after remaining tense for a moment longer. He turned to Sakura and said, "Our part is done." She nodded and took out some ninja wire, saying, "Let's tie these guys up and go help Naruto and Summer." They quickly completed tying their hands and feet together and encircling them with wire to hold them all back to back after collecting the unconscious bodies. In order to prevent them from accidentally falling into the water and drowning, they were then placed atop a flat rock. Kakashi patted his hands together to dust them off and said, "Now that that's done, let's go find the others." The Junin noticed Sakura's flat tone as she said, "I don't think that'll be too hard." When he looked over, he noticed that the Pinkette was gazing up at something. His eyes turned to a deadpan expression as he followed her gaze. There were multiple firework-like explosions going off in the sky above them, at a distance of roughly 6 or 7 meters. Suigetsu, Karen, and Jugo's bodies were sucked into a strange distortion and vanished completely without a trace as they ran toward the fighting. "Yep, that's them." Kakashi sighed, "Let's go check it out." The two reached the scene just in time to see Naruto, who had been hit by one of the arrows, get caught in an explosion. Sakura exclaimed, "Naruto," with concern. Kakashi's outstretched arm stopped her as she was about to advance to assist. "What are you doing? We need to go and help H." The Junin interrupted her, saying, "He's fine." His gaze lingered on the explosion's aftereffects as they gradually disappeared, exposing Naruto's ripped body. He was missing half of his right pant leg, and his vest was blown off completely, exposing his nicely trimmed torso. Nevertheless, his body showed no signs of injury in spite of everything. Sakura gaped at the comparatively armed Uzumaki and asked, "H, how?" Then she caught sight of something else. "That mark." "Yeah," she said, and Kakashi went on. "That's what appeared whenever I angered him during the test." However, the crimson eye began to spin. "It seems he has more control this time. We'll wait and observe from here. When we see an opportunity we'll strike, but for now stay put," he instructed. She nodded and turned her attention back to the fight. "Right." When Sasuke emerged from the explosion unscathed, Naruto smiled at his stunned expression. Even though it was an unwelcome gift, he thanked Kami inwardly for the significant durability boost he experienced when using his demon mark. The loss of his vest and his ruined pants did make him a little depressed, but he reminded himself that Summer had a scroll with an extra outfit in case something similar occurred. Which, now that he considered it, was a lot. Naruto taunted, "Is that all you got, ya bastard?" Sasuke scowled at the blonde while clenching his teeth. What power is that? Angrily, he thought. What made the loser so strong? The Uchiha started to form another arrow, but he stopped when his eyes began to ache. Fuck it. The disadvantage of using these eyes is still something I'm not used to. Yo, Sasuke. You seem to be running out of steam. You sure you don't want to just surrender? Replied Naruto. He had chosen to show a little mercy after noticing that the Uchiha's eye was bleeding. He had orders to at least try to bring him back alive, even if he no longer regarded him as a friend. Not a chance, loser, pretty much snarled Sasuke. I will not accept your pity and I will defeat you. The blonde waved off his opponent's ire, saying, yeah, whatever you say, I guess I'll just go back to beating the crap out of you. With a growl, the dark-haired man made his Susanoo shape another arrow. Observing this, Naruto positioned himself more firmly. As he raised his arms in a brawler, Like Manner with one arm drawn back, he firmly planted his feet on the water and used chakra to reinforce it. Sasuke ignored this alteration and kept launching the arrow. "Disappear!" he yelled, releasing the projectile. After speeding in the direction of the Uzumaki, the arrow vanished from view. Despite the impending danger, Naruto remained emotionless as he watched this happen. Then his arm jerked forward and struck the chakra arrow at a speed greater than the projectile itself. After a brief period of silence, the sound of a landmine detonating violently broke the silence. The water behind the blonde was blown away by the arrow's force, which also sent hurricane force winds across the battlefield. The stopped projectile then made a sharp cracking sound and then completely broke apart in a single instant. The Uchiha's attack was totally overpowered by Naruto's increased strength, which also rendered it ineffective. Without Summer, it was safe to assume that everyone else was astounded by Naruto's power, but Sasuke was the most taken aback. How? As fear started to seep into his heart, he asked himself, "What is he doing?" He exclaimed, "What the hell are you?" in a voice that was equal parts hysterical and angry. Naruto flexed his wrist and relaxed his stance, smiling. "On the other hand," he said, "I can be many things. I could be your ally, enemy, friend, or whatever. However," he said in a lethal tone, "if you harm anyone in the Hidden Leaf, then I'll be your executioner and I will not hesitate to end your pathetic life." They were all taken aback by his words, but Sasuke recoiled in surprise. The Naruto he had left behind all those years ago was not this one. The loser lacked the courage to even threaten, much less execute, the death of another person. But he knew he was definitely not bluffing when he looked into the Uzumaki's hard blue eyes. Before giving himself a mental slap, he retreated one more step. "Hold on tight. He's attempting to influence you." He tightened his jaw. "I must make use of it. This could be my only opportunity to defeat him." Amatara. A sharp pain throbbed in the back of his neck, and the world abruptly went dark. Sasuke said only, "WH. What?" before he passed out completely. Naruto yelled at the masked person who had knocked the Uchiha unconscious, "Hey, who the hell are you?" The newly arrived man was wearing an orange spiral-shaped mask with a single eye hole on the right side, and he was dressed in the cloak that all Akatsuki wore. The man said smoothly, "My name is unimportant right now." He pointed to the unconscious body he was carrying over his shoulder and said, "However, I'll be taking this with me. I'm afraid I still have use for him right now. Come, Kisame." Beside the unidentified man, the swordsman emerged, appearing a little more worn out. "What do you want, Toby?" he said impatiently before continuing. "I was having fun with that white-cloaked girl." The now named Toby said naively, "Leader." Sama asked Toby to tell Kisame Senpai to hurry up. Toby follows orders because Toby is a good boy. Naruto tried to comprehend the abrupt change that had just taken place by blinking once, twice, and then 3 times. Kisame inquired, a little agitated, "Is that so?" "Hi," he said grumpily, "then I guess I have no choice. Let's go, Toby." "Hi, Kisame. Senpai." They both turned to go, but Summer, Sakura, and Kakashi appeared in front of them, stopping them. Naruto yelled, "Hold on a second," which caused them to turn around. He concluded with a dramatic finger pointing at the two, saying, "Where do you think you guys are going? Our mission is to capture Sasuke, and some fished-face bastard and a bipolar guy with mental issues are not going to stop us." Toby Stage muttered, "Senpai, what does bipolar mean?" Quite bluntly, the swordsman said, "It means you're an idiot." "Oh, okay," he exclaimed cheerfully, as if he was unaware of the other's increasing perspiration. "Oi!" a displeased Naruto cried. "Stop ignoring me. Let's ignore the loud blonde guy. Hey." The drops of sweat became enormous. Kisame rolled his eyes and drew lead. GHT. "Let's just go already." Kakashi, who had an electrically charged hand ready next to the masked man, said, "I don't think so." Lightning blade. The other saw the lethal jutsu strike the masked man and then bend straight through him. "Whoa. That was too close." Toby laughed, as if oblivious to the shocked glances directed at him. "Welp. It's time for Toby to go bye. His body and Sasuke's started to strangely morph before completely disappearing. With a body flicker of the water variation, Kisame soon followed suit. Naruto tried to follow them, but all of his strength abruptly left him, and he collapsed to his knees. With a sharp pant, he grasped at his throbbing head. This was a disadvantage of his skill. It had a time limit, and when it was over, he was left feeling worn out and suffering from a terrible headache. His hazy mind was disturbed by a worried voice asking, "Are you all right, Naruto?" He looked up into a set of gleaming silver eyes. Blizzard Rose appeared barely more worn after Summer had switched it back to dual sword mode. There were several tears in her trademark white cloak, and tiny scratches were all over her body. The water was also causing her clothing to stick to her body. "Yeah, I'm fine." Naruto exhaled sharply. "Just give me a minute." The Rose reassured him, "Take all the time you need." She looked at the condition of his body. His eye was already normal again, and the mark was gone. He had lost all of his clothes except for his sandals, gauntlets, and a portion of his pants. As Summer watched the muscles tense and relax with each breath the blonde took, her face flushed a little and her heartbeat accelerated. She was a little embarrassed by the sight of him without a shirt, even though she had seen him without pants because they were on the same team and had been together for a long time. Summer jumped a little when Kakashi asked, "Hey, are you two alright?" She turned and saw Sakura and Junin approaching. The silver-eyed girl said on their behalf, "We're fine. He's just a bit tired. He'll recover in a minute." "That's good. We'll return to the village whenever he recovers," he responded. Sakura inquired, "What about the mission? What about it? We may have defeated our opponents, but they still managed to get away." Kakashi murmured, "I can't sense them anywhere, so that means either one of two things. 1. They have a means of masking their presence, or 2. They have a technique that allows them to teleport. Either way, this means one thing. The mission was a failure. The battle with Sasuke and his group, as well as the Akatsuki member Kisame, took place a few days ago. While in Nami no Kuni, Team 7 had been assisting in the cleanup of the enormous volumes of water that the shark-like man had left behind. When one of the residents of Wave realized Naruto was the hero of Wave, they immediately changed their minds about the damage caused during the battle. After that, they were much friendlier and more helpful. However, Sakura and Kakashi pouted a little because they weren't acknowledged. Naruto asked, "What you doing?" As he looked up from the little journal he was writing in to see Summer entering the tiny hotel room they had rented together, holding 2 cups of coffee in each hand. Summer was wearing white sweatpants and a tiny red shirt that showed off the lower portion of her stomach. At first, they were offered to remain there for free, but they turned it down, claiming there was no need. A journal. He put his journal aside and took the hot beverage that was offered. The Rose quickly took over the space he had created on his bed for her. She took a seat and leaned back so she could comfortably lay her head on his chest. "It's something Ozpin suggested I do. Leave something for future generations," is what he said. Summer sipped her beverage. "Sounds like something he'd say. So, what are you writing in it?" "Our time at Beacon." Naruto dismissed her inquisitive gaze. "I figured if I'm leaving something for the future generations, then it might as well be something that's real." Summer nodded and made a "oh" face. With some hesitation, she said, "That makes sense, I guess. Are you going to write about all your experiences in it?" Sighing softly, "Yes, all of them. I plan on showing this to Yang when she gets older as well, so it has to be complete of everything. The good times, the boring times, and even the tragic ones. I don't want her to think that the life of a hunter or a ninja is as glorified as everyone seems to expect." Summer gave a slight nod. She whispered, "This is mostly for Yang, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is." His blue eyes widened. "I know I won't be able to protect her forever, but I want to make sure she has the best life I can give her. Or at least one better than my own." Summer turned to straddle him after setting aside her now empty coffee cup. Before she placed her hands on his shoulders and met his eyes, Naruto stared at her in confusion. She smiled gorgeously as he felt his eyes water a little. There is no way that would ever happen. She has a father that loves her too much for something like that to happen. She leaned in and kissed him, saying, "And I'll be here to help you every step of the way." Naruto immediately recalled how much of a woman Summer is as they intensified their kiss, his tongue sliding into her mouth and then being matched by hers. He had gotten really down whenever Raven had been gone, and he could only concentrate long enough to tend to Yang. He didn't take care of himself as a result, though, and his health started to decline. Summer herself had made the decision to put aside her personal sorrow in order to assist him. Even though she was given the cold shoulder in return, she continued to visit his home every day to assist with cleaning and cooking. He eventually became less withdrawn and more receptive to her inquiries, and he started to look forward to her visits. When he finally offered her a place in his own house after 3 months of her being there all the time, she accepted right away. He was unable to pinpoint the precise moment he fell in love with her, but he was certain that he loved her as much as he loved Raven. As they broke off the kiss, he said in a voice full of love, "Thank you, Summer." She simply put her face into his chest and smiled brightly again, her cheeks flushed red. No problem." They remained silently in that position, enjoying each other's company. "Yo. You guys awake yet?" Unfortunately, a certain silver Hair Junin hopped through their window, ruining the moment. Oh, never mind. It seems you're a bit busy. Let's come back later, Sakura. A head of pink protruded from the opening as the door opened. You sure, Kakashi? Sensei? I thought you said we were going back today. He concluded with a playful twinkle in his eye. We can wait a little longer for these two to finish their business. Though I have to tell you, he said gravely, sex is frowned upon when a mission is in progress. Their faces glowed brightly, though Naruto's was much less intense, and they glared at the Junin. The effect was instantaneous. We are not having sex, exclaimed Summer, her tone of anger out of proportion to her crimson face. She looked at her blonde friend. Tell them. Naruto was about to agree when a playful expression came into his eyes, but he changed it to a mocking, perplexed one. He nibbled lightly and nuzzled into her bare neck, asking, we weren't? Isn't that what you wanted? Naruto, she exclaimed, suppressing the tiny groan that tried to come out of her mouth. From his perch on the window sill, Kakashi laughed at the lighthearted teasing. I think that's enough messing around, Naruto. Although he wanted to laugh too, the blonde chose to enjoy himself a little more before quitting. Who said I was playing? He whispered passionately as he leaned forward and bit her ear. He thought Summer's response was adorable as steam escaped her ears and she started to stutter unintelligibly. When she heard the others laughing, she stopped saying, w.wa, h.ha. She turned to see Sakura, Kakashi, and Naruto's amused expressions. In a hushed tone, she complained, pressing her head against the blonde's chest, meanies. All jokes aside, Kakashi uttered after he had stopped laughing. Naruto, are you good to travel? He answered, I'm fine. Then he said, somewhat bitterly, we could have left a lot earlier, ya know. Sakura said, yes, we know, from the door. But when you collapsed after trying to help out, we decided it was best that you rest up for a while. The still-red Summer giggled softly into Naruto's chest as he complained. Besides, Kakashi continued, we're lucky that the people here at Wave decided not to charge us for the damages caused during our fight. We can thank Naruto for that. The blonde in question laughed and gave his neck a sheepish scratch. I didn't do anything to help though. The Junin comforted him, saying, that's okay. Just be happy we didn't lose all our money. Naruto let out a sigh. The fact that the locals didn't demand payment was very kind. Not being able to use any of the mission's reward money and having to pay out of pocket would have been terrible. He would have been in dire straits if he hadn't had the lien from the missions he and his team completed back at Beacon. It's definitely not what you want to be when you have a child to raise. However, if everything went as planned, he and Yang would be well off for the remainder of their lives. Before he could complete it, they simply needed to return to Konoha. You must endure the pain. Raise it to the top. You must persevere through everything, if that's your preference. We're yelling he and the others were startled when his scroll abruptly exploded. While Summer and Naruto relaxed after realizing the sound, Sakura and Kakashi tensed as their hands automatically drifted towards their pouches. The blonde reached into his bag and took out a small square device that was the source of the noise. Unable to resist, Kakashi asked, so, that's a scroll? Naruto gave a nod. He revealed a lit-up holographic display when he pulled the opposite ends of the scroll apart, saying, yep, and it seems I have a call. The blonde raised an eyebrow and then grinned as she took a look at it. Excuse me for a moment. I have to take this. Naruto got up and walked past Sakura, out of the room, and down the hallway out of earshot after sliding the now recovered Summer off of him. Kakashi turned to the rose and raised his only visible brow, asking, what was that about? Sakura added, yeah, and when did Naruto start listening to that type of music? In response to both questions, Summer shrugged and said, probably someone from Beacon or Patch, and I don't know. He's listened to that genre since I met him. Kakashi inquired, any ideas who? Nope. That means you have plenty of time to continue your previous illicit activities with him. The Junin drew lead. Anyway, tell Naruto that we'll be leaving this afternoon, so be ready before then. He couldn't control the next words that came out of his mouth. Kakashi quickly disappeared in a body flicker and barely escaped being brained by the coffee cup that the red-faced rose threw. Summer huffed and sat back down, breathing heavily. She growled and glared at Sakura, who had been trying her hardest to contain her laughter. If you try to tease me, I will shove your own foot up your butt. The pinkette raised her hands in submission and used an imaginary zipper to lock her lips. My lips are sealed. With a sigh, Summer tried to defeat the red monster, attempting to control her face. Sorry, she said. I just don't like being poked at. Already had enough of that from my old team for being the shortest person in Beacon, she was grumbling. Sakura recalled how she had been teased for having a big forehead when she was younger and said, I understand. You were the smallest because you graduated early, right? Summer nodded and said, me and Naruto. Naruto and I both left Signal in our second year. She fixed her grammar as a picture of a white-haired girl staring at her appeared in front of her, open-mouthed, as if waiting to speak a lecture. Sakura did not call attention to her accident if she had noticed it. I still can't believe Naruto of all people graduated from a school early. He was one of the top students at Signal. Summer replied with pride. Ospin had to have seen something special in us to accept us so early. I guess so. Wait, the Pinkette thought. If you guys graduated in your second year, does that mean Naruto managed to get a date with someone 2 years older than him? She asked, a little confused. Summer's silver eyes grew cold, and the temperature of the room slightly decreased. She said frostily, yes. Sensing a bad topic, Sakura attempted to change the subject by asking, So, how do you and him meet anyways? Summer returned to normal as if a switch had been thrown, and Sakura sighed in relief. Scary. Well, the meeting was actually quite normal. Which is amazing considering everything that happened afterwards. She laughed. It was right before I started my first year at Signal. I was training in a forest by home when I heard the sounds of explosions nearby. A much smaller Summer Rose exclaimed, Whoa, as she gazed in wonder at the clearing encrusted with craters. The silver-eyed girl looked strikingly like her older self, complete with the same attire and white cloak. The only differences were the slight variations in her attire and the length of her hair, which ended at her shoulders, with the bangs on the right side of her face being longer than the other. Hope whoever did this was a friendly Rasengan. Summer looked up at the sudden shout and saw two blondes in identical orange outfits flying at her while a spinning blue orb was held out in front of them. She moved reflexively and watched in astonishment as the seemingly innocuous orb struck the earth, ground itself, and then burst into a dome of blue energy. Unsurprised, Sakura said, he almost killed you the moment you met him? Summer defended him, saying simply, yep. Though it was an accident and he did miss. Sakura nodded despite rolling her eyes. Whatever, please continue. Yikes, said the young Rose, I'm glad I didn't get hit by that. A gruff voice yelled, crap, from the huge dust cloud that the orb had created. I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was around here. Summer's breath caught when she saw the boy standing there as the dust settled. The boy painted quite a picture, wearing only orange jumper pants and an armored mesh shirt, with a jacket of the same color around his waist. Even though his clothes were distracting, she was more drawn to his piercing blue eyes, spiky blonde hair, and the peculiar whisker-like marks on each cheek than to his attire. The boy's voice startled her and made her cheeks flush as she realized she had been staring at him intently. Hello? I didn't hit you in the head, did I? She asked. Her blush rose as she stammered, H. In response to the blonde boy pressing his forehead against hers, she squeaked, W. Wait or y.ud. Doing? I think you might have a fever, he said, worried, because you're burning up. Sounds about right. Sakura cocked her head, he's about as dense as a brick when it comes to anything but fighting. Because of her own experiences, Summer felt compelled to concur, but she chose to remain silent and carry on with the story. I don't have an fever, exclaimed the Rose. She said, and you're way too close. Which made the boy leap back a few feet and wildly wave his arms in front of him. Sorry, he cried, his face frantic. Please don't hit me. He defended himself by wrapping his arms around his face. Summer blinked and said, somewhat bewildered, I'm not gonna hurt you. You're not? The blonde boy said, reluctantly lowering his arms. Nope. Not even a little. Nope. So, I'm not gonna be injured. Nope. His eyes widened, and he paused, oh, that's great. He yelled, wait, what? And then stopped when he heard faint laughter. When Summer stopped laughing, she said, calm down, I'm just kidding. About hurting me or not hurting me? With ease, she answered, the second one. That made the blonde boy a little more at ease. Why did you think I'd hurt you? It didn't take him long to consider. He stated plainly, because girls always beat up pervy Sage when they're angry. This really doesn't surprise me. Nodding, the Rose said, it shouldn't. Pervy Sage? Summer inquired, a little taken aback by the peculiar moniker. With a pout, he concluded, yeah. He nodded enthusiastically, that's what I call my sensei. Though he still hasn't taught me anything yet. She still knew what the blonde wanted, but was still a little perplexed by the odd words. I could help if you want. Do you know any jutsu? The boy asked, his face doubtful. He fell on his face as the rose said simply, "Nope." "But," he said, quickly getting back up on his feet. "I do know someone who is good at fighting and I can ask him to teach you." "Really?" he said as he emerged before her, his star-studded blue eyes wide. Startled by the sudden proximity, Summer retreated. "Yeah, but," she said, gesturing with a finger, which made the boy pay closer attention. His face brightened in comprehension as he said, "You have to tell me your name." He exclaimed, "Right. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Datbeo," with pride. Summer asked, raising an eyebrow, "Datbeo?" "Naruto." The boy turned away and flushed. He complained, "It's a verbal tic." As she laughed, she said, "I think it's cute." "Seriously?" he said, his eyes widening in surprise. "Yep. Was I not supposed to?" Naruto embarrassedly scratched his cheek and said, "Well, it's just, I think most people find it annoying." She gave a shrug. A simple smile spread across his face as she said, "It's endearing." "Thanks." His big smile made his eyes squint until they were practically closed. The blonde's face turned an intriguing shade of red as a result of this. "Oh, yeah," he said with a curious expression, "you never told me your name." She said, her face returning to its usual expression. She pumped her fist enthusiastically and exclaimed, "I guess you're right. Well, my name is Summer Rose and I'm going to become the greatest huntress on Remnant." Summer froze mid-pump when Naruto asked, naively, "What's a huntress?" Woodenly, she turned to face the bewildered blonde. "Huh?" Thinking she hadn't heard him, he repeated, "What's a huntress?" A little louder. He shifted uneasily as she gazed at him for a few prolonged moments. "Did I do something wrong?" "How?" she asked at last. He looked at her curiously. After struggling for a moment to find the right word, she exclaimed, "The bestest ever." With her arms raised. "How do you not know what a huntress is? It's like the greatest job in the whole world. The hunters and huntresses are like super cool superheroes that protect us all, they're like." When the girl had finished her tirade, Naruto looked at her for a long time. As Summer slowly lowered her hands, she realized what she had done, and her face flushed once more. "Whoa, he's going to think I'm strange now," she thought sorrowfully. Her head shot up so quickly that the blonde thought she might get whiplash. "Okay." "What?" Her heart raced when Naruto smiled at her again. "I understand. After all, I'm gonna be Hokage someday. That's what they call the leader of my village, by the way, so I know what it means to have a dream," he replied strongly. When he was done, Summer gazed at him in wonder. "Whoa, that was so cool. You should be, like, a motivational speaker or something." Her eagerness caused the blonde to take a step back. Abruptly, she stood before him, her silver eyes gleaming with anticipation. "I have to take you to see my friend. You guys will get along so well, you even look the same," she spoke quickly. Something male said, "Summer," from the woods. Her hand caught his wrist and she pulled him in the direction of the voice. "There he is now. Come on," she said. Naruto was dragged for a few seconds before being let go and falling onto his face. He got up and rubbed his forehead, complaining that pervy Sage was wearing his headband, but he stopped when he heard a rough voice talking. "Who's the kid?" Naruto turned around and noticed Ada. Naruto plopped himself back onto the bed after returning through the room's door. "Yo, I'm not interrupting anything, am I?" he asked. He repositioned himself so that his head was resting on Summer's lap, utterly disregarding the glare Sakura gave him. The rose's hands brushed through his hair almost automatically. Although she had a hint from Jiraiya's story, Sakura was determined to find out who the other guy was, so she bit out, "Yes, you were." He shrugged absently, almost causing the pinkhead to slug him, saying, "Oh, whoops, my bad." "Whatever," she grumbled, "I have stuff I need to go do anyways." His eyebrows went up as he asked, "Is that so?" Her words were tentative, but she said, "Yep, important stuff." He gave a slow nod, saying, "You enjoy your stuff, then." Sakura said simply, "I will," and then turned to leave the room. In response, the blonde leaned deeper into the rose's lap and closed his eyes, while she did the same, but against the headboard. "She doesn't have anything to do, does she?" asked Summer shortly after the pinkhead had departed. Naruto pops the P at the end of his response, "Nope." After exchanging a brief chuckle, the two fell silent. "So," the rose said, breaking the silence, "Kakashi said that we are leaving this afternoon." He uttered absently, "That's nice." Summer scowled. "Anyone important call?" "Nah," he said dismissively, waving his hand. "Just some random drunk who got a hold of my number." "Kirao," he said, "that was fast. Wasn't that hard?" "What did he want?" She shrugged. "He said he just wanted to check in on us." He sighed. TCH, like he needed to. We're not little kids anymore. However, she noted, we are the youngest members of the team though. She chuckled a little. Meh, he said, waving a hand. Details. Summer questioned, is that all he wanted? Course not. He had some useful information to give about the Akatsuki. She noticed that Naruto's voice was a little too calm and asked, what was it? They plan to release information on my heritage to other villages. Oh, that's not so bad. Still too calmly, he concluded, they also plan on capturing Young and staging it as a kidnapping from Iwa. Summer sounded, oh. Could she say anything else? She is still very angry because she felt she should be angry that the Akatsuki would try to take Young, but Naruto's cool headedness is keeping her from getting too upset. He should be the one losing his temper over his daughter being singled out, but he shows no emotion at all. Normally, this would be concerning, but she had seen him act in this manner before, just before he destroyed an ancient Deathstalker nest that was close to her patch home. She said, not inquired, you have a plan, don't you? Naruto didn't give her a vocal response. He looked into her eyes instead, and when he opened his eyes, he saw two icy blue eyes that had lost all of their warmth. When Summer finally turned away, a silent struggle came to an end. Fine, she said. But if anything comes up you'll tell me, right? Naruto smiled as his eyes regained their typical warmth. Of course. That's a promise. I'll hold you to it, Summer said with a smile. After saying, not a problem. After all, he turned to face the rose in her lap. I never go back on my promises. With a mocking exasperation, she said, I know. You've only said that every time you made one. Although he didn't deny it, Naruto rolled his eyes. She was being honest. That did not, however, imply that he would just accept it without taking any action. He moved his face into her stomach, blowing gently on the exposed skin as he moved dangerously close to her pelvis. As the blonde began to plant butterfly kisses from the bottom and worked his way up her body, Summer gasped and tried not to laugh at the sensation. She gasped, WH. What are you doing? Instead of responding, Naruto persisted with unwavering determination. In the process, he grabbed her shirt's hem and pulled it over her head. After putting up a token fight, the girl let the item of clothing fall off her and be thrown aside, leaving her wearing a white sports bra. Naruto's hands slipped under her underwear, which wasn't exactly the most brusque, but he didn't seem to mind. When he started to expertly palm her breasts, she gave a sharp gasp, and when his lips touched her neck, she gave another. He covered a spot with his mouth and sucked hard, making Summer flush and groan aloud. He moved on after releasing the area, leaving a dark mark that didn't appear to be going away anytime soon. Naruto. She tried to object again, but was cut off when his lips seized hers in a brief tongue. Wrestling brawl broke out. One that his superior skill cost her. Because the wet appendage left her in a daze strong enough to not notice a single hand stop its groping activities and travel downward, it left no space unexplored. But when her weeping lips were rubbed by fingers through her sweatpants, she noticed. Shivers of pleasure ran up Summer's spine as she arched her back and groaned into Naruto's mouth. The rose, panting and gasping, was quickly pushed to her breaking point. I'm. Huff. Gonna, she attempted to say, but when the blonde vanished from above her, she opened her eyes in disbelief and lost her high. She frantically glanced around the room and soon saw him by the door and leaving. Naruto saluted her cheerfully, mischievous blue meeting desperate silver's glare. With a tone that matched his eyes, he said, I'm going to go get some breakfast. He left Rise perplexed after saying, I'll see if they have any strawberries left for you. Her expression instantly changed from bewilderment to anger upon realizing what he had just pulled. Summer's face began to heat up, and she gave one irate yell. Naruto. As the blonde heard the yell, he pulled his index finger out of his mouth and walked casually down the hall, saying, sweet. Naruto stuffed his hands in his pockets and carried on, grinning to himself. Had his retaliation gone too far? Most likely. Did he feel bad about it? Not at all. Summer had, after all, forgotten one of the first guidelines he set for everyone, not just his friends. Datbeo, never tease an Uzumaki. Everybody ready to go? Kakashi asked his group. The four were standing at the end of the Great Naruto Bridge, their bags in hand, having gathered at the scheduled time. Nevertheless, there was company. Behind them, a sizable contingent of villagers gathered. A well-known teenager with dark hair and a fisherman's hat was at the forefront of the group. It was Inari. Someone Naruto had met when he first arrived here and was staying with Tsunade. Because of the consequences of Gato's rule, he had been a little brat with severe emotional problems back then. However, Naruto swiftly ended this when, following a tirade about how unfair life is, He gave the boy hope while saving him from 2 thugs who were trying to kidnap him. Later, Inari left and, with his mother Tsunami's assistance, brought the wave people back together to rebel against Goto's rule. When he and the civilians standing beside him reached the bridge, which was still incomplete at the time, they frightened off the remaining thugs and rescued the weary ninja. Now that Nami no Kuni has stabilized, he works as an apprentice carpenter for his grandfather, Tazuna. After bringing Summer a bowl of strawberries and making his getaway through the window, Naruto had talked to Inari and the rest of his family. They had decided to catch up after he literally dropped in on them while they were shopping. Inari yelled, "See you later, Aniki," as the 4 Konoha ninja turned to go. "Don't be a stranger." Naruto returned the younger teen's smile. "I won't, and I'll be sure to visit when I get the chance." "You better." As they began their journey back through the treetops, Kakashi said, "You know, there won't be much time to actually come back here considering your responsibility back in the village." Sighing, Naruto said, "I know." His final words were determined, "But I'm sure I'll find a way." Kakashi simply responded with an eye smile before turning to look at the team member with the silver eyes. Summer had had a permanent frown on her face, seemingly directed at the residential blonde, ever since she had reached the bridge. When he had attempted to inquire about her issue, all he had received was a stern look and flushed cheeks. Later, when he turned to face Naruto, he saw the smug smile on the blonde's face and chose to keep it between the two of them. However, if the pleasant aroma coming from the rose and the hints from earlier were any indication, he did have a hazy notion of the problem. Sakura, however, was well aware of the situation and found it difficult to look at the two without blushing. She heard and saw all that had happened, having stayed behind and most certainly not spying on them. Among other things, Naruto's daughter is the target of the Akatsuki. She initially thought she should be concerned, but she ultimately chose to let him handle it after he revealed his plan. She had been about to leave at that point, but she heard Summer gasp and immediately returned to her hiding place. Sakura couldn't help but remark, "He's very good with his hands," as her cheeks turned a healthy shade of red. Her mind drifted into La La Land as she wondered what he might do to her. She had thoughts of illegal activity. Naruto watched his pink-haired teammate's face turn an intriguing shade of crimson as a dazed expression entered her eyes, and he thought, "I wonder what's going on in her mind." He turned to his other female teammate and asked, "What do you think, Summer?" Rose just cocked her head to the side and said nothing. "And I'm still getting the silent treatment," he murmured. "How long do you plan on keeping this up? Would it help if I said was sorry?" He made another attempt, asking, "What if I gave you some strawberries?" "Cookies?" She gave him a quick glance with some interest in her eyes. "Strawberry cookies?" At last, Summer gave in and said, "Make it homemade and you have a deal." Naruto smiled. "No problem. I'll make it for you as soon as I can when we get back. Special recipe." Before he could finish his sentence, the rose was on his back, requiring him to straighten up and hold onto her thighs to keep them from falling and drooling down her chin. Summer pointed dramatically forward, saying, "We must make haste to Cookie Village, my loyal steed. Now, mush." Laughing at her unexpected childlessness, Naruto dutifully obeyed her command and drove on, Summer laughing the entire time. As he watched the two drive off, Kakashi remarked, "That was odd." The silver-haired Junin looked back at his other pupil and sighed in agony at her expression. "Just one normal team. Is that too much to ask for?" When Sakura suddenly broke out in a heavy nosebleed that sent her flying back into a tree where her head was implanted down to her neck, it seemed as though the universe was saying that. "I guess not." However, he laughed at his student's twitching body. That was quite funny. "We're almost there," exclaimed Summer with delight as the village gates appeared. "I can almost taste it now." When Naruto sensed an unwelcome presence, he stopped speaking after grinning and opening his mouth to respond. "Hey." The rose landed on a branch and then fell to the ground below, whining. "Why'd you stop? We were so close." She stopped and spread her senses when Naruto asked, "Do you feel that?" She widened her eyes and glared at a location in the forest where 2 sets of red eyes gleamed in the dark canopy. The eyes emerged from the darkness to show their white, bleached bone armor and dark, wolf-like bodies. As they lumbered closer to the pair and started to circle them, the 2 Beowulf Grimm gave a menacing growl. Summer snarled, "What are they doing here? I thought they couldn't get past the boundaries." Naruto was deathly quiet in contrast to her loud anger. The blonde abruptly disappeared, his hair casting shadows over his eyes. One of the Beowulfs had a spiked fist implanted into its skull, and it exploded, sending its head flying, just as fast as he had vanished. The other Grimm was startled by its partner's unexpected death and failed to move quickly enough to avoid the white blade that cut it in half. Summer's face was contorted with disgust as she stood behind the Grimm, her sword drawn. She turned to Naruto, whose cold blue eyes glared at the Beowulf's dying body, and she sheathed Blizzard Rose, flicking her blade to the side and letting the blood coating it fly off. "What now?" she questioned. She almost froze when his eyes locked with hers as he turned to face her. He said coldly, "We need to report this immediately." When Summer approached and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, his expression softened. "Then, I need to make a few calls to Remnant about the borders." Naruto exhaled deeply. "I'm sure we'll figure this out, okay?" "Okay." It was not long before Sakura and Kakashi caught up. Sakura did, however, arrive a little unsteady and with bloody tissue in her nose. The Junin asked, "What happened here?" as soon as he saw the Beowulf's almost dead bodies. Naruto said simply, "Grimm." Kakashi stiffened. These were the only two in the area. He continued. The Silverette remained vigilant despite her slight relaxation. He asked sharply, "How did they get through the boundaries?" Darkly, Naruto muttered, "I don't know, but I plan to find out." Summer said reassuringly, without moving her hand, "And we will. But we must inform Lady Tsunade first." "Wait," Sakura interrupted, perplexed. "What boundary are you talking about?" Summer responded. "Surrounding the entirety of Remnant is a large dome-like barrier made entirely out of natural energy," she clarified. "Natural energy? Energy gathered from nature itself." She continued, "This happened before the era that ninjutsu was born in and was created by the leaders of giant creatures that are today known as summoning bosses." Sakura waved her hands in front of her and said, "Wait a minute. You mean to tell me that an entire continent was hidden by summonings?" Summer gave a nod. "That's exactly what I'm saying. According to some books on Remnant's history and what I learned from Jiraiya, the leaders banded together and combined their sage signatures into one barrier that isolated Remnant from the elemental nations and made into a separate world entirely." Sakura questioned, "But why would they do that?" "Because," Naruto said, taking up the sentence, "when Grimm started spawning in Remnant, it was decided that it would be best to contain the infection, so to say. It was discovered that the natural energy summoned creatures used was the perfect opposition to the Grimm. So, the decision was made to combine the might of their energy and conceal the area the Grimm were in along with everyone who resided there." He continued the narrative in spite of Sakura's horrified gasp. The people there were expected to be hunted down and killed. However, against all expectations, they survived and discovered a mineral created by the boundary, which was later appropriately named as dust. With this, the last remnants of humanity within the barrier banded together and used this newly discovered weapon as a means to fight back against the Grimm. But it was insufficient. The Grimm's strength and numbers were too great for dust alone. However, there was still hope. When the natural energies within the barrier attached to the infant's pure soul and created its own special bond, many of the newborns were endowed with their energy. Aura was the name given to this newly discovered ability. This energy was used to aid in the battle and ultimately drive the Grimm back far enough to begin what would later be known as Remnant, which stands for the remains of humanity. As you are all aware, the rest is history, Naruto concluded. Sakura and Kakashi stood in stunned silence, neither of them having heard the whole story. "So," the Pinkette said slowly at first. "You mean to tell me that the elemental nations and the land of Remnant used to be one thing?" Naruto gave a nod. Then she exhaled, "Wow." Kakashi pointed to the spot where the bodies of the two Beowulfs once lay and said, "But that doesn't explain why these two were able to get through. If the boundary is made up of nature energy like you said it was, then the Grimm shouldn't be here right now." Naruto admitted, "Yes, that is true. This means that someone has found a way to bypass the boundary to allow them through." Sakura questioned, "But who would do such a thing?" He said, "I don't know. It could have been anyone. The boundary has several points where the summoning creatures placed their energy. If someone were to disrupt enough of these spots, then the barrier could be weakened long enough for the Grimm to get through. If it was that simple, then why didn't the people in Remnant do it themselves in the beginning?" Kakashi inquired. "Because," replied Summer, "the points were placed outside the boundary so that the ones inside wouldn't be able to sabotage them." The Junin gave a sympathetic nod. Even though it was harsh and inhumane, he could understand the reasoning behind it. He believed that if he had been alive at the time, he would have taken the same course of action. He may have been called callous for holding this opinion, but in his view, it was always preferable to sacrifice thousands in order to save millions. Kakashi concluded, "Then that means someone from outside of Remnant doing it." "Yeah," Naruto replied with a sigh, "but in order to see the points, the person must be able to use nature energy themselves, and I only know of one person who can do so, but I highly doubt Pervy Sage would attempt something like this." Sakura inquired, "Lord Jiraiya can use nature energy?" "Yes, he can use an incomplete version of Sage Mode that he learned from the Toads," he replied. "I would have learned how to as well, but my condition prevented me from taking the natural energies into my body. Right, well, Kakashi remarked, observing the blonde's hesitation about the topic. We are already within sight of the village, so let's get this reported so we can plan out our next step. The team had already spoken their part and was waiting for Tsunade's orders just a few minutes after signing in at the front gates. She said, "So, what you mean to tell me is, at last, you not only failed your mission to capture the Uchiha, but now there are Grimm possibly running around the elemental nations?" There were conflicting responses from the team. Summer hid inside her cloak, Sakura bowed her head shamefully, Kakashi buried his face in his book, and Naruto suddenly became fascinated by the ceiling. After a long silence, she finally lost her temper and threw a book at the closest person, who happened to be a certain blonde named Uzumaki. The blonde took the blow right to the face and was flung back onto his ass because he was not prepared to be attacked by the flying projectile. With a big book-shaped mark running vertically down his face, he stood back up and yelled, "Ow! What the hell, ya old hag?" Tsunade said simply, "I needed your guys' attention and you were the closest." Naruto's legs twitched wildly above him as he fell on his face in shock. "Anyways," she added after the blonde had recovered, "someone needs to explain to me how you managed to fail the mission." From behind the book, Kakashi drew lead. It was because of the interference of the Akatsuki members Kisame and a masked man who claimed to be called Toby. Toby used some sort spatial distortion technique to hide Sasuke and his team before escaping via teleportation. We were unable to track them and Naruto became incapacitated due to the backlash of his demon mark. Tsunade replied, "Okay. I can understand this, but please inform me on how you encountered a Grimm within our borders and whether or not we should expect more. We theorized that someone on the outside is tampering with the boundary points and may have allowed the two Beowulf through. As for the possibility of there being more, well," Kakashi paused, "my team and I didn't sense any within our immediate surroundings at the time, but we do not know about anywhere else." The female Hokage sat back in her chair and looked thoughtfully. She said, "I'll employ a squad of Anbu to check the borders and send out an alert to all active shinobi to keep a lookout for anything suspicious. That is all for now, you're all dismissed except for Chunin Uzumaki. I have something else I would like to discuss with you." Summer initially objected, but she was soon placated by the assurance that she would see Yang, and Naruto and Tsunade were the only people left in the office after the others, excluding Naruto, left. Then the Hokage turned to the last person in the room, who was now rocking back onto his heels, looking curious. Tsunade's expression darkened. "Naruto," she said, "we need to talk." As the group, excluding Naruto, departed Tsunade's office, Sakura inquired, "What do you think she wanted with him?" With his nose still in his book, Kakashi shrugged and asked, "Who knows? I'm sure it's important if she asked the rest of us to leave. Still, if Naruto or Lady Tsunade wants us to know, then they will tell us later." He interrupted her. "Just forget about it for now." Summer watched from a distance without saying anything. Because she would be informed later, she didn't bother to consider what was happening in the office. She was aware that Naruto wouldn't withhold information from his friends, which included his beacon team, having been his best friend for 6 years, teammate for 4, and girlfriend for 1. He would just give them the information in the most direct and kind manner he could, even if it meant hurting one of them emotionally. Now that she thought about it, it was actually pretty funny at times. Sakura's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Think, Summer?" She turned inquiringly to the pinkette. She said sheepishly, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?" Sakura gave an eye roll. She repeated, "I asked what you thought they're doing in there." "I don't know. Like Kakashi said, we'll probably find out later. If not," Summer laughed. "Then there was no need for us to know." Sakura asked disbelievingly, "Wait, seriously? You're not the least bit curious?" "Of course I am," was the Rose's straightforward response. "But I trust him to inform us if it was something truly important." This response appeared to stump Sakura, and even Kakashi glanced at her from over his book. "Well," he said in a low voice, "the amount of faith she has in him is quite something." "Anyways," Summer added as they made their way out of the tower and into the streets. She started to head in the other direction. "I'll see you guys later. I have a little girl that I haven't seen in about a week to attend to." Kakashi waved his hand languidly as Sakura nodded slowly. Sure, go for it." She yelled over her shoulder, "See ya later," after she had gotten quite a distance away before completely vanishing. Kakashi turned back to his other pupil, but he was overcome with sweat when he saw the pinkette limping away with a depressed aura surrounding her. After a moment of staring, the silver-haired Junin returned to Icha's comfort and walked away without a word. "Definitely not handling that fire," I said. Jiraiya commented, "She's missed you a lot, you know." He was watching Summer bounce the laughing blonde toddler in her lap. Naruto too. She picked her up and made faces at Yang, something the child attempted to imitate with varying degrees of success. I'm sure. Following a specific unsuccessful attempt, the two burst out laughing. So, Jiraiya started after the two had stopped laughing. "How was your first real fight with an S-ranked shinobi?" She said honestly, "To be honest, I was terrified." He responded with ease, "That's understandable. Not many has the guts to stand up to an S-ranked missing nin and fight them, let alone escape with their life. So be happy that you're alive at all." "I know. I am. But," she said, clenching her cloak's edges with her hands. "I could tell he was holding back, a lot. And if that's only a part of his strength, then I shiver at the thought of fighting him fully powered." "Could you tell me what happened?" Slowly, Summer moved Yang to make her seat more comfortable and said, "Sure." Though it wasn't so much a fight, as it was a one-sided beatdown. When the enormous sentient sword and the two-headed spear, Blizzard rose, collided, sparks flew. Summer gritted her teeth and unleashed a torrent of blows that were too subtle for the untrained eye to see. Kisame smiled as he used the flat end of his sword to block her blows before swinging the blade down in an overhand motion. The ice the Rose had been using as a platform was destroyed as she instinctively danced to the side to avoid the blow. Then, deftly spinning her spear around her body and swinging at his bare back, she kept navigating around the big man. This was not to be, though, as Kisame retaliated with a back kick. Summer was already moving from her blow, so all she could do was quickly raise a defense, which was quickly broken by the kick's force and threw her back. Her forearm ached and she grimaced as she flew backwards through the air. She could already feel a bruise starting to form, even though her aura was protecting her. She flipped, summoned a wall of ice at her feet, landed in a crouch, and then shot off in a flurry of speed that broke the wall of ice beneath her. Summer spun and landed the end of Blizzard Rose on her opponent's head, appearing beside him in a whirlpool of wind. In response, Kisame merely raised his sword. But when there was no impact, he blinked. He ducked as one of Summer's spear blades flew over his head, a reflex he had developed over the years. Kisame remained in a crouch and rotated, swinging at the Rose's feet while she remained suspended in midair. Summer anticipated it and put Blizzard Rose's demise on hold. She was flipped upside down by the force and position of the blades connecting. She followed the spin, nicking his cloak as she swung her spear around her body. When Kisame saw this, he smiled with excitement and then delivered a straightforward, non-lethal jab. However, Summer sensed that something wasn't quite right about the seemingly harmless punch, so she instantly bowed back at a 90-degree angle, letting the blow pass over her. Immediately after she had ducked, a shockwave blasted from his fist and dug a trench into the water behind her, suggesting that this was a wise decision. After continuing on its course, the wave finally crashed into a group of partially submerged trees, uprooting them entirely. Summer didn't have time to gape at the display of strength, so she pushed her arms back and put her hands on the water below. She frozen the surroundings and encased Kisame's feet in a thick layer of ice, sending a wave of aura through her body. Summer flipped back onto her feet, stepped forward, and gave his chin a devastating split kick, knowing she had little time before he broke free. There was a loud crack, and then Kisame was launched skyward, the ice covering his feet breaking and the frozen platform cracking. Kisame rubbed his bruised jaw and grimaced in the air. What the devil? With a hint of surprise, he wondered, where did that sudden strength come from? Unbeknownst to the blue swordsman, Summer's body briefly experienced a crimson flame like aura just before he was kicked, but it vanished as swiftly as it appeared. But the Rose wasn't done with her assault. She slammed a hand to the ground, causing 6 big, razor-sharp pillars to shoot out of the water at blurring speeds directly at the still hanging Kisame. The remaining half of the spikes appeared in a cross in front of the airborne man, stopping him after he deflected 3 of them to the side. Before smashing the final pillars to pieces, Kisame grinned, but that smile was short-lived as Summer emerged from the shattered ice, already performing a slow frontward somersault. A huge tower of water erupted as the heel fell and Kisame's body was thrown into the waters below. Like a bomb, she descended onto Kisame's position. As she plunged through the water, she split it in 2, spinning like a buzz saw. Another wave of water rose as she hit the bottom. This one went back rather than up, and it was significantly smaller than the other. Then the wave turned to solid ice and instantly stopped. When the 2 fighters were surrounded by dust, or in this case, water, below Kisame, Summer was crouching, one of the Blizzard Rose's blades touching the ice beneath his feet. With one last shout of effort, she stepped back and split the man in 2 at the waist. As Kisame's body swayed slightly and then fell to 2 different sides, There was a brief pause. There was the sound of water splashing into more water as the two pieces fell. Wait, water? As the body turned into water and mixed with the tiny lake, Summer's eyes grew wide. Wildly scanning the area, she tried to get a glimpse of the man but was unsuccessful. That is, until she noticed a shadow form at her feet that was growing steadily. She let out a loud curse as her head snapped up. With only a few feet separating them, Kisame was above her, with Samahata ready to attack. Shit. There is no time to dodge. I must attempt to block. The previous crimson aura reappeared, but this time it moved more steadily. She moved into a more solid stance, leaning forward slightly as it engulfed her entire body, from head to toe, bringing blizzard rose up above and solidifying the ice around her feet. In a matter of seconds, this process was completed, and she was just in time to protect her form from Kisami's massive sword drop. At the point of contact, a visible shockwave exploded and a deafening clang sounded. Before he smiled with laughter shining in his eyes and increased the force of his blow, Kisame appeared a little taken aback that the rose had been able to block him. His sword pushed down Summer's spear slowly, causing the ice beneath her feet to crack and crumble. Kisame finally broke through her defenses with a final burst of strength. Similar to Tsunade and Sakura's method, Samahata's bandaged blade taped against the upper portion of her back before releasing chakra through his sword as soon as it made contact with her. Since this was only a crude replica of the 5th Hokage's monstrous strength, the majority of the power was sent awry rather than being turned to paste, which caused the ice beneath them to completely melt and powerful wind gusts to blow across the battlefield. Nevertheless, there was still enough power left to blast the rose away. Summer's body abruptly disappeared and then reappeared, skipping across the lake's surface and causing tiny water explosions with each impact. When she finally struck a big boulder, leaving an impression of her body in the hard rock, she came to a painful stop. She had finally reached her energy limits, as evidenced by the flickering and dying crimson aura around her body. Her breath rattled in her chest and some blood trickled down her chin as she coughed painfully. She made an attempt to move, but was too tired to do so and too far into the rock to escape. Even her hold on Blizzard Rose was weakened, but she managed to hold on somehow. She was distracted from herself. Analysis by a low laugh. As Kisame approached her slowly, his sword resting on his shoulder, Summer glared through half-lidded eyes. His arrogant grin never left his face as he praised, "Well, I didn't think you'd last this long, girlie. The only ones who managed to last as long as you have were my old partner and leader. Sama. Congratulations. You get to die with honor." Even though she tried not to speak, Summer's glare became a little scared as he approached. When he was directly in front of her, he stopped. He swung, intending to kill, and hefted his sword. Despite its somewhat low tone, an unidentified voice said, quite clearly, "Stop." The blade stopped, scraping her cheeks and causing blood to trickle down. For a brief moment, the swordsman appeared motionless, and then he sighed. He put Samahata back in her holster and turned away, saying, "Seems playtime is over." He vanished in a whirlpool of water after saying, "You got lucky this time, girlie. I won't kill you right now, but know this. The next time we cross blades in battle, only one will leave with their lives." The frozen rose was left behind. Afterwards I managed to pull myself out of that rock and make my way to the rest of the team, but when I got there the rest had already gotten away. The summer was over. Jiraiya, who had been silently listening to her story, hummed softly. It seems to me that you managed to earn his respect." "Respect?" she repeated, looking at him bewildered. "How so?" The toad sage shrugged and said, "Heck if I know. I don't know how that man's mind works. Maybe you impressed him with your prowess in using Blizzard Rose." "Oh," said Summer plainly, "but that still doesn't explain his last words or the voice. He probably saw some potential in you. If there was a chance you could provide a better challenge later, then he is most likely giving you the opportunity to improve yourself, and that voice could be this leader. Sama, he spoke of before. But why would he allow someone to get better and allow them chance to possibly defeat him?" Jiraiya shrugged again, asking, "Who knows? Maybe he's a battle junkie or something. Just be glad that you were given the opportunity to continue living." Summer pounded a fist into her open hand, and Yang imitated and appeared to enjoy it as she repeated the action multiple times. "I am happy. I guess this just means I'll have to train more and get stronger for next time," Summer said. Jiraiya laughed at the antics of the two. He said, "With that attitude I'm sure you'll get stronger in no time." The rose smiled appreciatively. After that, the two fell into a comparatively quiet silence. With a start, Summer inquired, "So, how was Yang? She didn't cause any trouble, did she?" "No. What happened?" Summer asked, giving him a look that made him uncontrollably freeze. He eventually staggered out with a faint squeak. Well, you see, I may or may not have, brought her to a bathhouse. And then? The Rose asked, her glare turning downright terrifying. Hurriedly, nothing too crazy, Jiraiya said. I just got Circa caught peeping, and before I got beat up like I usually do. Yang stopped them with her cuteness. So, you only used her as a way to get yourself out of trouble? Asked the white-haired sage, who nodded frantically as Summer nodded slowly and with an uncanny calmness. She closed her eyes and exhaled deeply. Jiraiya sank back in his chair with a sigh of relief. Okay, I can understand that. I'm glad you see it, my Gak, he cried in agony as his head was slammed into the floor by a foot. As if, yelled Summer as she stomped on the Toad Sage's fallen form repeatedly. Like hell, I'd be okay with that, you pervert. Wait, ow, stop, aren't you supposed to be the gentle and nice one? No mercy. As he continued to be battered into the floor, Jiraiya let out a torrent of tears. He painfully extended his hand to the blonde toddler who was watching from the couch. He begged, help me, Yang. After a moment of just staring, Yang pointed a tiny finger and said, quite clearly, pervert. As soon as Jiraiya's body turned white and began to fall apart, the world froze and he heard glass shattering. Summer stopped her assault and gazed at the pathetic figure of the supposedly mythical Sannin. Just for fun, she was going to kick him again, but she stopped when she suddenly smelled something divine. Drool started to flow from her mouth as her silver eyes gradually grew larger. She quickly disappeared from the apartment, leaving Yang perplexed and Jiraiya still downed. There was silence for a second, but then Summer came back, seized Yang, and swept straight out the door, which was slammed shut. For a moment, Jiraiya's shattered body was a stain on the floor before it spread out into a cloud of smoke. Now that she and Naruto were living together in their apartment, Summer followed the alluring scent in an animal-like style. She followed the scent until she came to the kitchen area, eyes closed and nostrils flaring. On top of the stove, she discovered a sizable cooking sheet. The sight of 24 freshly baked cookies caused stars to form as she opened her eyes. Each of the delectable treats had a simple brown appearance with tiny chocolate chips strewn throughout, giving the impression that little thought had gone into them, but Summer was aware of this. She picked one up slowly, almost reverently, and put it to her lips. She nibbled a little. Her taste buds instantly exploded with flavor as the combination of chocolate and strawberries clashed and then somehow managed to blend flawlessly. She would have noticed the red strawberry filling on the edge of falling out if she had looked at the half-eaten cookie. But instead of looking, she started eating it. As Summer methodically destroyed the little treats, what followed would be remembered as the most lopsided massacre in cookie history. She went on until her hand struck metal as it extended for another. She looked at the tray in bewilderment after emerging from her cookie daze, and then a horrified expression appeared on her face. No. She let out a dramatic cry and collapsed to her knees. I did it again. Jiraiya's tears streamed down her cheeks, just like the ones she had earlier. If it weren't for the piece of paper that fell on top of her head, she would have kept doing this. She grasped it, her eyes bleary as she gazed at the paper. I hope your cookies were a hit. I only put the ones on the tray because I knew you would eat them all at once. I made more, but they aren't visible until I remove them. But there are two, and I'll tell you where they are. There's a small plate with 2 cookies on it inside the dresser next to my bed. Before you leave, know that these are for Yang, not for you. I'll stop making you for the remainder of the month if you eat them. In any case, I hope my apology treat was enjoyable. P.S. I can only conclude that shadow clones are useful for purposes other than combat if you're wondering how I was able to create these so quickly. A chibi Naruto was shown smiling and making the peace sign at the bottom of the page. Summer gazed at the paper indifferently. Ah, come on, she was abruptly saying. Why'd ya have to hide them? She exclaimed as her eyes widened. Her head trembled violently as she said, wait, what about the ones in the dresser? I could get those. No, those are for Yang, and if I eat them, Naruto might not make me any more for the next month. Munch, munch. She broke out of her hysterics at the sound of chewing. When Summer turned her head like an owl, she saw the little blonde girl grinning broadly and contentedly consuming 2 large cookies. With excitement, Yang muttered, Papa's cookies, around the food she was eating. Summer's face broke into a tense smile. She let out a defeated sigh and said, those are definitely Papa's cookies. She rubbed her head impatiently and said, I guess I'll just have to wait until Tsunade finishes speaking with Naruto. How long will that take? If I have to wait any longer, I will die. How long is this gonna take, Granny? 'Cause I have a feeling Summer has already found and eaten all the cookies I had my clone make and is probably tearing up our apartment looking for the other ones. Naruto was holding a hand on his hip. With an empty tray beside her, he could easily picture her sprawled out on the floor in comical despair. Additionally, he could see that she would get up and futilely look in every nook and cranny, unaware that the cookies were concealed in a ceiling scroll on the roof outside. Tsunade responded, resolutely disregarding the fact that she was simply referred to as old. It shouldn't take too long. I just have a few questions I need to ask you. Naruto said, okay, with a hint of curiosity. Shoot. Right, she said first. Well, first off, how much do you know about your birth parents? Everything. He replied right away. Tsunade nodded, seemingly anticipating the answer. Good. She waited for him to confirm before continuing, saying, that makes this easier. As you probably already know, your parents, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, are well-known people in the world of shinobi, for both good and bad reasons. Because of this, the information of your conception was kept a secret from many people, including yourself, but now I believe you are ready to handle the consequences of the village knowing your heritage. What do you think? I am. Tsunade reiterated, good. Is there anything you wish to know that you might not already? There was a pause before Naruto asked, did they leave anything behind for me? The blonde woman paused to reflect. Minato, despite his fame and accomplishments, was a clanless orphan and Kushina's clan's home was destroyed, so there isn't much I can do for you there, but they did have a small residence outside of the Nara district that you can use. There's also the money both of them have assimilated over the course of their ninja careers. Tsunade responded. According to Naruto, why by the Naras? He didn't harbor any animosity toward Shikamaru's family. The placement just seemed a little arbitrary. As she acknowledged, I don't know. If there was a reason, then I was not privileged to this information. He gave a sympathetic nod. When can I get the money and directions to the house? I can give you the keys in a few moments, but the money will have to wait until the next council meeting. Which is 2 weeks. Okay, I'll do it, but I want to attend the meeting, Naruto said, nodding once more. Tsunade laughed. Not a problem. After all, you are the rightful head of the Uzumaki clan, so you must be in attendance. He grinned back at her. As he started to walk away, he said, right, well, is that all? He stopped when she said, no, one more thing. I need your honest opinion on the Grimm situation. What do you think allowed them to get through? Naruto exhaled deeply and closed his eyes. At last, he said, I don't know. Tsunade gave a nod. She watched him go and silently close the door behind him. Very well. You are dismissed. Shizune will be waiting at the front desk to give you the key and map with directions to your new home. Good luck. Upon confirming that he had left, she turned and addressed the apparently empty room, saying, Anbu. Immediately, a figure appeared in the middle of the room, already crouched with their head bowed. In a feminine voice, the figure asked, yes, Lady Hokage? Tsunade gave Neko instructions, saying, I need you to gather Tenzo, Boar, and Fox immediately. The female Anbu disappeared as abruptly as she appeared, saying, Hi, Hokage. Sama. After just a few more seconds, Tsunade reappeared with 3 more men in masks. You 4 are being assigned an S-class mission to investigate the supposed appearance of Grimm within our borders. Start from outside the gates where the beasts were spotted and work your way to the closest section of the remnant border near Nami no Kuni. The squad leader for this assignment will be Boar, with Tenzo being your second in command. The perpetrator might still be lurking, so be discreet. If you spot anyone suspicious, investigate and report back to me. Any questions? Stepping forward was the Anbu wearing the fox mask. How will we know if there were a disturbance in the boundary? None of us have the ability to channel nature chakra. Tsunade gave the man's words a nod. Yes, I am aware. That is why I'll be sending Jiraiya along with you. Fox took a step back and bowed his head in agreement. Any more questions? No one shifted position. With a puff of smoke and a swirl of leaves, the Anbu disappeared. Good. You have your orders, move out. Leaving the blonde Hokage alone in her office once more. Yo, Tsunade. What did you need me for, or not? Tsunade's brow twitched as she turned to face the white-haired man who was crouched on the sill of her open window. As he hopped down, Jiraiya gave her a cheeky smile and said, one of these days I'm gonna seal up that window. In a sing-song voice, he said, no you won't. With a sigh, the blonde, tched, and turned away. After a brief pause, she said, I take it you heard all that? He popped the P and said, yep. Then you know what to do. Huh. After that, the two fell silent. At last, Tsunade asked, did you already talk to Summer? Jiraiya said, yeah, then grimaced and held his head in a state of phantom agony. Girl sure has a strong kick. He laughed uneasily as she grinned and said, "You told her, didn't you?" "My clone did. Definitely not one of my proudest moments. Yang even called me a pervert." Tsunade looked at him curiously, her eyes glimmering with laughter. "I thought you were proud of being a pervert." He exclaimed, "I am," before essentially losing his enthusiasm. But something about a kid who's not even 2 yet telling it to your face kinda hurts your self-esteem. With hope, she inquired, "Does that mean you're going to stop peeking?" But he jumped up and exclaimed. Seemingly oblivious to the increasing tick mark on Tsunade's forehead, he exclaimed, "Not a chance. There are still so many wonderful breasts to observe and I will not stop until I see them all. Besides, my publisher is still waiting for my next book and I need the inspiration." She glared, "Are you done yet?" Jiraiya gave her a quick look. He started to say, "Of course not. Unless you're willing to let me see those wonderful breasts of yours." But was interrupted when an angry Tsunade's hilariously large fist struck his face. She yelled, "Just shut up and die, you fucking pervert," as his body flew through the open window and vanished in a strange twinkle in the sky. After panting a little, Tsunade exhaled deeply. Perverted idiot. Naruto was already outside returning to the apartment after obtaining the map and key from Shizune. But then he heard a familiar scream, and he stopped, looking up in time to see his sensei flying across the sky in pain. Naruto gazed at the deteriorating body in blankness until it vanished into the distance. He continued to stare, then slowly shook his head and muttered to himself, "Stupid pervert." He then resumed his stroll. Naruto quickly arrived at his soon-to-be former residence and ascended the stairs to his room. After taking a key from his pouch, he unlocked the door and started to twist the handle before stopping and gathering his strength. After closing his eyes and inhaling deeply, he pushed the door open. "I'm home." He had a lot of expectations when he opened the door. A house torn apart by war. A few holes in the wall, perhaps. What he didn't expect, though, was a fully functional room with no lights on and nothing broken. He called out to the apparently empty room as he carefully closed the door behind him. After waiting for a moment for a response, he heard Yang calling out to him, "I'm back." She exclaimed, somewhat muffled, "Daddy," with excitement. He chose to go to his room after assuming, based on her voice, that she was there. He entered through the open door, walking slowly and skillfully ignoring the sudden chill that ran up his spine. He noticed his blonde daughter sitting by the pillows at the top of the bed and said, "Hey, sweetie." She was chewing on his old nightcap, which she was holding and which showed a strange black dot and white creature with 2 big frontal teeth. She appeared to be very focused on her work, and when she heard him come in, she just looked up briefly while she kept chewing on the cap. "How was your day?" Gak. A weight fell on top of him, sending him crashing to the ground, cutting him off. As Naruto fell, he instinctively turned to look at his assailant. When he recognized the person above him, he stopped reaching for a kunai. "Summer?" he inquired inquisitively. He started to say something else, but the rose gave him such a strong shake that he almost bit his tongue. Summer yelled in his ear, "Where are the cookies?" "If you stop shaking me, I'll tell you," he said in a screech due to the rapid motion. Apparently sensing this, she paused and leaned in to look into his light-headed eyes. Then she hissed, "Cookies." Before shaking himself out of his reverie, Naruto's head lolled for a brief moment more. The fire in her eyes made him wince a little. "If you get off of me, I can go get them." After seemingly reviewing his offer in her mind, Summer nodded and slowly stood up. In what he assumed was a royal tone, she ordered, "Lead me to the cookies." Naruto chose to comply and got to his feet, bending at the waist. His smooth, low voice made the rose blush a little. "As you command, my lady." She stumbled a little before clearing her throat and gathering herself. Right. Now take me to the treasure, pheasant." He bowed once more and extended his hand, saying, "Yes, Lady Summer." She gazed at his hand for a moment, then took it and let herself be escorted from the room. "Please follow me." Yang remained on the bed and silently observed all of this. Her eyes convey bewilderment at her parents' behavior, but she remains silent about it. But Summer tries to do something when Naruto starts to lead her out of the room. When she pulled to remove the cap from her mouth, she neglected to loosen her jaw. When the hat was released, it snapped back, catching the toddler in the face and causing the young blonde to fall back with a startled grunt. After a moment of lying back and gazing at the ceiling, Yang turns over and glares at the spot where the naive-looking cap wound up after hitting her. She reached for it and tried to toss it. She yelled, "Bad Cappy," as the hat blew off. The nightcap hit the bedpost, wrapped around it, and was flung back at her, but she missed it because she turned away with a smug expression. She had to face plant into the bed, though, because she felt the aftereffects in the back of her head. Yang remained in a prone position for a moment, then sat up and confusedly rubbed her hair. Her eyes instantly turned back to the cap, which was sitting naively in the same place as before. But that was not how the young Uzumaki saw it. Her eyes flashed with shock and fear, then with determination. She pushed herself to her feet, stomped unsteadily to the hat, and gave it a menacing, read. Adorable glare. This evil nightcap would be defeated by her, regardless of the price. Unaware of his daughter's predicament, Naruto sat on the couch in the living room and watched with obvious laughter as his silver-eyed girlfriend steadily and slowly ate her cookies. He had led Summer from the bedroom to the balcony, left her there, and leapt to the roof. Then he raised a phony tile and took out a regular-sized scroll from inside. Ignoring Rose's inquiries about the location of the cookies, he went back inside, dragged her to the couch, sat her on his lap, unlocked the scroll, and sent chakra into the sealing matrix. A plate of hot cookies materialized in their laps in an instant. Fortunately for Summer, Naruto had created the scroll he used. Here Jiraiya's sealing scrolls have an added feature that lets you store hot food without worrying about it cooling down. It was an invention of Naruto's to store his ramen. Sadly, it was not to be because, for some strange reason, the scroll had exploded in his face every time he attempted to seal some of the noodles he had purchased from a simple wok. He was teased for a while because this incident had happened directly in front of his team. Although he was stewing inside, he had attempted to hide it. He simply was unable to determine what had gone wrong. The blonde made a few more attempts, all in private, but the outcomes were the same. Ultimately, he concluded that the awesomeness of ramen was simply too much for the art of sealing, and he stopped there. The small voice in his mind that reminded him of the enormous demonic chakra entity that had once lived in his stomach had been dutifully ignored. Anyway, let's get back to the subject. Summer had squealed with joy when the cookies had arrived and kissed Naruto for a long time, so passionately that it left him slightly dazed, before eating the delicious treats. The blonde had only reminded her that it would be better to take her time and enjoy them after he had left his reverie. Summer hadn't responded, but she slowed down and ate much more slowly. The cookies were all devoured, as was to be expected, but this time the rose appeared content. Setting the plate and scroll aside, Naruto promised to wash them later. Then he pulled Summer deeper into his lap by putting his arms around her waist. The girl with the silver eyes tried to object, but she was satisfied and just lay against his shoulder with her eyes closed. There they stayed for a while, just enjoying each other's company. After a minute, Naruto declared, "I got the key to my parents' house." Summer looked at him curiously. "Is that the reason Tsunade told you to stay?" He grinned. "Yeah, she said that she'll reveal my heritage after I attend a council meeting in 2 weeks." She didn't bother to inquire as to whether he was prepared for the criticism he would face, saying instead, "That's nice." He would let her know if he wasn't ready. She reasoned that he had been preparing for this for some time. Without some kind of backup plan, I doubt he would comply. Naruto went on. She also asked about the Grimm. Her head turned woodenly towards him, and her eyes widened instantly, causing her to stiffen. "And," he shrugged and said, "I told her I didn't know. Knowing the old hag, she'll probably send a squad of Anbu and pervy sage to investigate." She sighed as her entire body relaxed. Concerned, she questioned, "Are you sure that'll be enough? I mean, with all the new mutations, will they be okay?" "They'll be fine. The barrier is designed in such a way that, even if it was tampered with, the strongest thing that could get out is an Ursa. Besides, pervy sage is there. He may be an irredeemable pervert, but he's still one of the Sannin. I have faith he'll accomplish the mission with little problem." He grinned broadly. What he said was accurate. It was a strangely designed barrier. It was designed to capture the most formidable of dangers. It was less likely to pass through if the Grimm was stronger. The concept is straightforward, but in reality, it is extremely complex. Even if it were one of the mutated varieties, it would have no trouble keeping the creatures of darkness inside. In agreement with his statement, Summer nodded. "Right, I'm sure he'll be fine." A voice behind them exclaimed, "Oh, I'm so happy my student has such strong faith in me." The rose fell from his lap and the two of them jumped in surprise. Naruto recognized the voice and turned, glaring slightly. He had just mentioned the same man. "What AR?" When Summer instantly recovered from her shock and jumped at Jiraiya, she startled the blonde, asking, "What are you doing here?" He moved swiftly to stop her mid-flight by putting his arms around her waist. "No, let me go. Ima tear his balls off." As she struggled to get away, Naruto held her in the air calmly and raised an eyebrow at her actions before looking at his sensei inquisitively. At the rose's threat, Jiraiya had flinched and covered his privates, but the blonde's expression made him look sheepish. "What did you do this time, N?" "Nothing really," He made an effort to hide it, but the perspiration streaming down his face didn't help his argument much. After realizing she couldn't get away, Summer stopped moving and said, "Oh, nothing, huh?" with a sickly sweet smile. "So, taking Yang peeping with you and then using her as an excuse to get out of a beating when you got caught is nothing." Jiraiya froze as Naruto's intent to kill swept over him, his face starting to match the color of his hair. Haha, you see, there's a funny story behind this." When he stopped talking, Naruto said, "Well, I'm waiting." "Right. Well, there was this, big thing. It was, like, huge, and there was another thing that was really small, and they were together doing this thing with a nothing thing." And you don't believe a word I'm saying, do you?" Sage gave up and shook her head. Come on, she already beat up my clone. Do you really need to do it again?" The Rose leaned forward, her hair casting shadows over her eyes, as if time had stopped. She whispered, "That was a clone." Jiraiya became aware of his error and froze once more. "No? You have 10 seconds to start running." "Wait," he cried in fear. "I came here for reason." 8, 7, 6. He attempted to beg Naruto, "Are you not going to stop her?" With a simple shrug, the Uzumaki almost gave Jiraiya a heart attack. "I only Kamato tell you guys that I wouldn't be able to watch NGY Lego on this mission. I gotta go before strips off my testicles later." After completing his portion, Jiraiya turned around and jumped through a window that was conveniently open, heading for the village gates. Summer concluded with the words, 3, 2, 1, 0. Naruto released his hold on her as soon as she got to the final number. She immediately started running after the man who had managed to get out not one, but two well-earned beatings. As Naruto watched his girlfriend run after Jiraiya, leaving a trail of dust behind her, he thought to himself, "I almost feel sorry for him." As distant cries of agony started to reverberate, he added, "But, I don't. I really don't. But I do wonder how he got back here after going to the moon," he said nonchalantly after giving it some thought. "Oh, that's irrelevant." After determining that Jiraiya's situation had been resolved amicably, Naruto thought he should go see how Yang was doing. And maybe even save his nightcap. After turning around, he made his way back to his room and opened the door to take a look. He had to suppress a chuckle at what he saw when his head finally popped through the gap, though. His daughter had somehow gotten his nightcap to stretch past its limit and wrap her body, causing her limbs to twist in strange directions, during the time he was gone. Had she not appeared more irritated than distressed, he would have been concerned that she had hurt herself. Yang's expression changed to one of relief, and she gave him a beseeching glance as if she had finally noticed him. She squeaked, "Daddy, help." At the sight of her expression, Naruto could no longer contain his laughter and let it out. When the younger blonde heard him, she responded with a pout. Her posture and that expression only made him laugh more. "Daddy."
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.